Before we jump in, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications. It seriously helps the channel grow. All right, let's get started.
During an expedition into mysterious ancient ruins, Luffy suddenly vanishes, leaving the Straw Hats frantic and desperate to find him. Instead of answers, they're pulled into something far more unsettling: Luffy's own memories. Trapped in the past with no clear way out, the crew is forced to relive moments from Luffy's childhood, moments he never shared and never planned for them to see. As they witness his early life, his bond with Ace, and the pain and loneliness hidden behind his usual grin, the Straw Hats come face to face with the emotional scars that shaped their captain. The journey becomes less about rescue and more about understanding, as each memory challenges how they see Luffy and their role in his life. Blending friendship, hurt, comfort, and deep emotional introspection, this long, heartfelt fic explores brotherhood, trauma, and unconditional loyalty, showing that some memories are buried not because they're forgotten, but because they hurt too much to share. Disclaimer: this story do not belong to me. The author is Daughter of the Sea by Kuchiachi.
Chapter 9, The Noble's Insidious Plan. Luffy just stood there gaping at his older brother, who continued to grin at him as if he had just told a funny joke. "But, you're dead," Luffy said quietly, more to himself than to Ace. "Pretty much," Ace answered brightly. Luffy blinked a few times, trying to make sense of this. Ace was dead, he knew that. But he was here with him, so that could only mean... "Ah!" he screamed out in panic, gripping his head as he stared around him in horror. "That means I'm dead too. What had he done? How'd this happen? Oh no, my crew will kill me if I died." He kept crying out. He died before he could become the king of the pirates. He couldn't believe this. "Sabo is going to be disappointed with me for dying too." Luffy, Ace said, but Luffy wasn't paying attention. "So this is the great beyond?" Luffy asked himself, staring around him. "Oh, this all sucks. After those 2 years training with Rayleigh too. Well, they better at least have some good meat up here. Oh wait, what if I'm in hell? Then that means that there can't be." "Wah, you mean I'm in hell? Idiot." Ace yelled and bonked him hard on the head to snap him out of it. "OWW. Luffy howled, glaring at Ace. "That hurt. Damn it, Luffy, you aren't dead." Ace shouted at him. For a moment this was just like how they used to argue ever since they were little kids. It was so familiar that Luffy had to stop, unable to stay angry with him. For a few minutes, the two just stood there looking at each other. A light breeze swept over the training site, ruffling their hair as they continued to gaze long and hard. Finally, Luffy blinked. "I'm not," he asked as Ace shook his head, the smile still tugging at his lips. "No, you aren't," he said seriously as he gently bumped his knuckles against Luffy's forehead, silently telling him what an idiot he was being. "It's a long story. But I don't like long stories," Luffy whined, still not understanding any of this. Ace only grinned wider, and seeing that smile made Luffy feel as if his insides were being squeezed. "I know you don't," Ace admitted happily, "but you'll enjoy this one. Let me explain. Straw Hats." The Straw Hats meanwhile were following the memory of the two boys through Trash Mountain, looking for Sabo. Ace kept picking up scraps of metal and pieces of lumber every few feet, just anything he thought might be useful to repair their base. While Luffy wandered a little behind him, still looking for that telescope. As Usopp watched, he had an idea to make a special telescope for the Sunny when he got back, one that could see for endless miles around in all directions. But just as he was getting around to designing it, Ace suddenly dropped everything he was holding and pulled Luffy down to the ground. "Ace, what?" Luffy cried out startled. "Shish," Ace hissed, forcing his head down. "Stay quiet. What's going on?" Chopper asked, not liking the tense look on Ace's face. "Don't know," Zoro said, his hand on his sword, though there wasn't any need. He just felt more in control of the situation with his swords with him, but I'm guessing that Ace heard it too. "Voices," Sanji added softly, his head turned in one direction. "Over there." Whether or not Luffy did as he was told, or he heard something as well, he stayed quiet as the two boys crawled up the mounds of junk and cautiously peered over it. At the bottom of the mountain was Sabo, and he was completely surrounded and outnumbered. "Oh, no," Chopper cried out, "he's in trouble." "Don't worry," Frankie smirked as Ace and Luffy shared a look and they nodded together. Like they're gonna leave their brother to fight all that on his own. "Looks like some thugs from town want some revenge from a beating." "I don't know about that," Robin said with a slight frown as she got a good look at the men. "They don't look like ordinary street thugs." "Wait," Nami started slowly, a horrible idea suddenly coming to her, "are they?" I never would have guessed that one of the infamous 3 troublemakers was a noble, the men said, and judging from his clothes and demeanor, he was the leader of this whole thing. He was a tall man with short hair that was all tied back on the top of his head so that they looked like stripes, while the rest of it flowed down long and unkempt down his sides. And as he smiled, half of his molars were missing in an alternating pattern, but what really got them was the air of malevolence that surrounded him. They didn't know who this man was, but whoever he was, the Straw Hats all suddenly hated everything about him. "Who's that?" Luffy asked Ace quietly as Ace put a finger to his lips to silence him. "Blue Jam, how do you know that?" Sabo yelled at once. Ace paled, looking uncharacteristically fearful. "Blue Jam," Brook repeated in confusion, knowing that he heard that name somewhere before. "Oh, I know that name. That's the pirate captain who they robbed from, oh dear." "Oh, shit," Sanji hissed, feeling a little sweat fall from the side of his face. "This isn't good. They may be good fighters, but they're still kids here. And they're up against heavily armed pirates." "Blue Jam," Luffy repeated quietly before his eyes widened and he got up. "Sabo's in trouble." He looked ready to jump down and fight, but Ace grabbed him. "Not like that idiot," he hissed, looking around quickly. That was when he spotted an old barrel lying near them and he grinned. "Perfect," he said, leading Luffy to it. "We'll use this." "Hey, don't hurt him now," Blue Jam smirked evilly, calling from below them. "Why'd I seriously doubt that?" Usopp said, wondering just what Ace had planned, hoping that he'd hurry up. Sabo knew that he was in trouble, but he couldn't run with so many pirates surrounding him on all sides. However, when the first idiot tried to grab him from behind, he kicked him hard, yelling out, "You wanna fight, bastard?" In this case, there are only 2 things he can do, Robin said softly. "Fight, or flight." "I vote for fight," Zoro smirked at the idea. "You always chose fight," Usopp yelled at him. "He's just a little kid and he's up against pirates on his own. He can't win." Hal said that he was going to be alone for long. Frankie asked with a merry laugh, jerking his thumb to Luffy and Ace. "Hey, what are they doing?" Chopper cried out, and they looked up in time to see the 2 climb into the barrel. "It looks like they're gonna," Sanji said, planning it out in his mind before he grinned. "Oh, this is gonna be good." Before Chopper could ask, Ace kicked off and suddenly they were rolling down the hill of junk towards the pirates. At once, the men were all distracted at the sight of the rolling, and before the nearest pirate, the one standing behind Sabo, could react, the barrel went slamming into him, knocking him clean off his feet and he was out cold before he hit the ground. At the same time, when the barrel hit him, Luffy and Ace broke out and charged ahead to join Sabo. "Ace! Luffy!" Sabo cried, grinning wildly and turned back, ready for a fight now that his backup had finally shown up. Luffy was stumbling around, looking slightly green as he muttered, "My eyes are spinning," and then he fell to the ground with a loud flop. "That is cute," Robin smiled. Ace on the other hand turned to Sabo, quickly asking if he was alright. Sabo just nodded with a relieved smile, "Yeah." Ace turned to face the pirates, still grinning, clearly not afraid at all. "If all 3 of us work together, these guys aren't scary at all." "That's right," Luffy exclaimed, getting back to his feet, his dizzy spell over with, "We even beat the Great Tiger of Mount Corvo." "Yeah, after fighting that thing, these guys don't seem that scary," Chopper said, thinking of that monster tiger. But the Blue Jam pirates were now looking angrier than ever as they slowly advanced towards them. "You little brats," one of them yelled threateningly, holding up his sword. Ace just kept on smiling. "To finish this fight quickly," he said to his brothers, "we just have to go for the captain." "Yeah," Luffy yelled in agreement and they ran together, Sabo dropping the supplies he gathered and they took care of business. Ace and Sabo were dodging out of the way of the blows, Luffy not even bothering with the clubs as he let them hit him, only for the blunt weapons to bounce off uselessly. "Now that's teamwork," Brook called happily as Luffy jumped up and head-butted one man. "Now they're starting to really become a force to be reckoned with," Frankie cheered on with Usopp and Chopper. "They're all monsters," Nami said shaking her head, but still grinning like everyone else. What she did wonder however was how Sabo could be one. With Luffy and Ace as fathers, they had reasons to be. She glanced over at Sabo, wondering just how he got so strong having been born a noble, especially the son of the type of nobles who hated something so harmless as dirt. Then again, she reasoned with herself as Sabo clubbed one man out with little effort, he had practically grown up here in the Great Terminal. She supposed that you had to get strong just to survive here. Once the boys took out all the underlings, they ran at Blue Jam, looking ready to finish the job. "Yeah," Usopp yelled, punching the sky eagerly, "you show him." But Zoro was frowning at the annoyed look on Blue Jam's face. He didn't look worried at all, even with all his flunkies taken out and the 3 boys charging ahead with those pipes. It wasn't until his hand went flying to the gun that was tucked into his belt did he understand. "Hell, they better run." Sanji yelled, but even as he shouted, Blue Jam had pulled it out and fired. Thankfully, it missed them but it was a narrow miss, just inches from Ace's foot, it was enough to stop them all dead. "What?" Ace exclaimed, having not guessed he'd do that. That was when they all ducked and covered, with Ace and Sabo hiding behind what looked like a broken ship's mast, and Luffy actually covering his face with a plank of wood on the ground. Did he really think that would be enough to stop a bullet?
Yo, quick pause, smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new here, share this video, and tell me in the comments which part you're loving the most.
Nami asked, sweat dropped. Not that he needs it since he's bulletproof, but still. I can see that these guys aren't used to fighting someone with guns, Sanji said with a frown. I hope that they weren't overconfident. Using guns can be a bit of a hassle, Usopp said knowingly. There's the loading and the gunpowder, though lethal when they hit you, they can cause a lot of trouble in the heat of battle. It is easier to use swords because they don't need reloading. Wow, you really know a lot, Usopp. Chopper said in amazement. Hee hee, Usopp laughed, rubbing his long nose with his thumb. What did you expect? I'm Master Usopp. Of course I'd know something as trivial as that. Why's Luffy-san hiding it all though? Brook asked, not understanding why Luffy looked scared, as he poked his head around the board to look at the gun. Well, if they're not used to fighting against someone with a gun, then what are the odds of him knowing that he was bulletproof? Zoro asked him. It's too bad, if they knew that, then he could have taken him on. Is this where he gets shot and finds out? Nami asking carefully, not liking where this was going. I'm not sure, Nami Swan, Sanji said, having a bad feeling as well. But I'm sure we'll find out. Blue Jam had them where he wanted and laughed darkly. Alright brats, he said, grinning evilly, stay where you are. Like we're scared of a gun. Ace yelled out, though he didn't sound as confident as he did a moment ago. Behind you, Ace. Chopper screamed out, but he might have just not said anything for all the good it did. At that moment, a few extra men had jumped out from some of the junk and grabbed them from behind. Damn, Zoro hissed, it was a trap. They must have guessed what they were going to do, and had some of them hide until they were distracted. Robin summed up as Ace and Sabo cursed at the men, fighting to get free. Move, screamed Luffy's voice, and they saw that while they were watching Ace and Sabo being grabbed, another had Luffy pinned to the ground. It was hard to hear what he was saying with his face held down like that, but they could all understand what his words were, or I'll send you flying. They should have run while they had the chance, Robin whispered softly. For once, I agree, Frankie said, now starting to sound unnerved, as he looked at the pirates, who were looking very pleased with themselves. They look like they mean business. You think they're still angry about the loot they took from them? Of course they would be, Nami said angrily. What kind of pirate wouldn't be angry at someone who stole from them? Not only did they steal from them, but they injured their pride by not only getting robbed by a bunch of pint-sized kids, but also beating up some of their men who worked directly for them, Zoro added. Even if they give it back now, Sanji said frowning, biting down on his cigarette, I doubt that they'll be letting them go that easily. But they'll be alright, won't they? Chopper asked, looking scared. Why yeah, Usopp stuttered, trying to convince himself that. I mean, come on, he laughed nervously, Luffy's obviously makes it out of this alive, doesn't he? I'm sure that they'll find some way to get out of this in one piece. All they have to do is stay calm and run when they get the chance. You think? Chopper said, sighing in relief, thank goodness. I was worried. But Zoro just kept frowning, that uneasy feeling back in full swing, and it was worse than ever. For some reason, he couldn't stop looking at Sabo, who continued to try and get free. Let me go, you bastard. Sabo yelled, looking ready to bite down on the man's arm, but stopped dead, staring horrified directly at the straw hats, as if he could suddenly see them. It was so sudden, that Zoro thought for a second that Sabo could see them, at least until he heard the footsteps behind them and he looked behind him at once, cursing himself for not being able to sense anything while within a memory. But the scared and shocked look on Sabo's face was enough to tell him that something was dangerously wrong. And what he saw made him freeze as well. A large group of men were approaching them, each one wearing what had to be gas masks, and each was carrying loaded rifles as they marched. But standing there with them was one man he did recognize, the same man that had called out to Sabo in one of the past memories they'd seen. Sabo's father. Is that? Nami asked slowly, staring at Sabo's father. It is, Usopp said, pointing wildly at him. That's Sabo's dad. What's he doing here? I don't know, Sanji said, his eyes narrowing as he and the armed men walked right past them all to face the Blue Jam pirates, but I can guarantee that it can't be good. You don't think that Sabo's dad isn't here to help them? Chopper asked them. Looks more like he's the one behind the attack, Frankie said, suddenly being vividly reminded of how that idiot Spanda used his battleships to attack water 7 years ago. But why? Chopper asked, not understanding. Just then, Sabo's father spoke, looking over them all with a cold look in his eyes. He was annoyed, as if he could think of a million things he'd rather be doing than see his son. Speaking of which, he was now looking at Sabo with disappointment as he spoke. Looks like we came just at the right time. Father, Sabo whispered in terror, too scared to move. At that one word, Ace and Luffy were also staring at him shocked, unable to believe what was happening. Blue Jam looked over at Sabo's dad and said, in an oily voice, Master, he doesn't have a single scratch on him. Master, Usopp repeated hoarsely, what's going on? It sounds like, Brook said softly, realization sinking in, that those pirates are working for him. What? Sanji yelled out. Since when do pirates work for nobles? Well, there are pirates who work for the government, or so they claim, Robin said, thinking of Crocodile with disdain. I guess anyone can be bought with enough money. What lowlifes. Frankie growled, instead of going out to the sea, they rather become servants. And not just any servants, Zoro said angrily, but to scum like them. They shouldn't even be called pirates anymore. Mercenaries, Frankie nodded in dark agreement. Or thugs, they do dirty work for hire. But why are they here? Usopp called out, not liking the cold look in Sabo's dad's eyes. He can't be planning on hurting his own son, is he? Blue Jam turned towards the man holding Sabo, and gestured for him to come over. Hey, Sabo called, suddenly remembering how to move as he fought tooth and nail to get away. Let me go, Sabo, Ace yelled. Oh, I get it, Sanji growled, his hands curled into fists. Sabo refused to come back on his own, so this piece of shit hired them to bring him back by force. But why now? Nami yelled. He didn't seem to care before. He didn't bother looking for him for the last few years, so why does he suddenly want him back home? Most likely, word's gotten out about his son being one of the 3 delinquents terrorizing the town, Robin answered. I see, Sabo's father said, looking over at Luffy and Ace as if examining a pair of stray dogs, before turning his nose up at them in disgust. It must be because of these two. They led Sabo down a path of evil. What did he just say? Zoro yelled out, growing more pissed off by the minute. Path of evil. Frankie repeated at the top of his lungs, now seething. Oh, I'll show him evil. Just wait until I get my hands on him. Well, it doesn't mean much coming from someone like him, Nami said, her eyes flashing in rage. He thinks that he can't do wrong after all. Give Sabo back, Luffy demanded, though he didn't sound that threatening, since he still couldn't break free. Yeah, that's right, Chopper yelled out loudly. Sabo doesn't want to go back with you. What do you mean, give him back? Sabo is my child. Sabo's dad asked him, as if arguing with someone over a piece of property. It is the responsibility of every child to live according to the will of their parents who gave them life. What kind of reasoning is that? Usopp yelled out feverishly, that doesn't make sense. Parents bring you into the world so that you do everything your parents tell you to do. He's a child, not a piece of property. Brook yelled out with him. But Sabo's father went on by pointing a finger at them, accusing them of lying to Sabo and that they convinced him to run away from home. Oh, come on, Sanji yelled, I don't believe what I'm hearing here. And Sabo had to live with this. Frankie yelled out, I don't think it took much for him to leave. Are you attempting to steal my fortune? Sabo's father went on to ask. Did they ever ask you for any money? Usopp shouted out, though they were just wasting their breaths. Maybe if you treated Sabo like a son instead of a bargaining chip, then he wouldn't have run away. I can't believe they're related, Nami cried out angrily. If I had to live with that, I'd run too. Screw the money. Did you just say that? Usopp yelled at her in amazement. I love money, she told him. But there's a limit to what I'm willing to put up with. And if I had to live with someone like him, she jerked her thumb at him, I'd rather run and be free. What was that, bastard? Ace yelled, looking almost as angry as he did when he fought Naguri that first time. But then, the pirate holding him slammed him into the ground to get him to shut up. Ace's face was cut on something sharp and blood splattered everywhere, including hitting Sabo's father's cheek. As if getting hit with mud, he yelled as he wiped the blood off with his handkerchief. Hey now, pirate, be careful how you handle these children. That's right, Chopper agreed, glad to see that he was on their side now. You got some of this inferior filth's blood on my face. He finished, throwing the cloth away onto one of the garbage piles like it was something disgusting. What? Chopper screamed out. I dare you to say that again. Frankie screamed out, holding his hands up, prepared to shoot a beam, only for him to rage out at not being able to do anything. Just a few seconds, Zoro growled to himself, his hands on his swords and flicking one out of its sheath. He was almost trying to will the memory to become real, just a few seconds to slice him to pieces, that was all he wanted. How can someone say things like that? Chopper whispered as Sanji was venting some of his anger out with Zoro by getting into a fight. To treat them like this. The whole time, Robin had been quiet as she watched the scene. She had been with the revolutionaries for the last 2 years, and she had seen a lot of things that made her feel sick. Dragon had been working hard for years to overthrow the world government, and it was because of nobles like these could she completely understand why. These people were heartless monsters, so arrogant in the fictional world that they live in. They think they could do anything they wanted, that they were better than others and they could do no wrong. This is just a hard view of what the world is truly like, was all she said. Nobles like them and in the world government are everywhere. They control everything with money and manipulation. To them, being a noble means that they are better. But as she thought about Dragon, she felt her lips twitch a little in a smile. Even after traveling with them, she had only met their fearless leader a few times. It had been a surprise when she first laid eyes on him. While it was easy to see the family resemblance with Luffy and Garp, it wasn't as so with Dragon. Ace, Luffy called out in worry, seeing the blood dripping from the cut on his brother's face. Robin just watched everything silently. Personality-wise, Luffy was different from his father's calm and collected attitude, but as she watched the little boy still fighting to get free, she knew that in other ways they were just the same. "Soulless bastards," Sanji hissed, "wish I could break his face." Sabo had finally broken free and ran to his father, standing between him and his brothers. "Please stop," he cried out desperately, "they didn't deceive me. It was my choice to leave home." "Yeah," Usopp called. Sabo's father just glared at him in irritation and told him to be quiet as two soldiers grabbed him and pulled him back. Once Sabo was out of the way, he looked back to Blue Jam and asked, "I trust that you pirates will take care of the others." "What does he mean by that?" Brook cried out, suddenly feeling a chill in his heart. Not that he had one, but he didn't bother to laugh at his joke. Blue Jam merely grinned at the idea, and continued to speak in that oily voice, "Of course we will, master." "I feel like I'm about to be sick," Zoro said in repulsion. "For once, we're in agreement," Sanji said, fighting the urge to throw up. "After all, we've received payment," Blue Jam went on, "rest assured, I will finish these two so they never bother your child again." Chopper's eyes widened and he cried out, "You mean they're—" Nami covered her mouth, unable to believe what he was saying. How could any father actually tell someone to kill his own son's friends? They can't really, how could? Usopp stuttered, feeling as if he was being punched in the gut with an iron fist. Frankie was grinding his teeth together as he glared back up, feeling like he was about to lose his mind from seeing this. How could he just tell them to kill them? Brook yelled out, "How do they sleep at night? They have no conscience," Robin whispered, "they hire someone else to do the dirty work and tell themselves that they're better, that it's justified, and they somehow believe that."
Yo, quick pause, smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new here, share this video, and tell me in the comments which part you're loving the most.
It's one thing to force your kid to go back home, but to say for his friends to be killed in front of him. Sanji asked darkly, "How much do you want to bet that he would have made him watch it?" "I think that's what Sabo's thinking of too," Zoro commented softly, watching Sabo's eyes widen in horror. "Wait a second, Blue Jam," he screamed out, looking ready to do just about anything as he glared back to his father. He then spoke, as if every word was hurting him, "Father, it's all right. I understand." His father looked down at him, his eyebrows raised as he asked coldly, "What do you understand?" Sabo didn't say anything at first, but he was biting down on his lip, looking as if he was about to be sick and burst into tears at the same time. Robin's eyes widened, recognizing that look at once. It was the same look that she knew she bore when she said goodbye to her crew back at Water 7, back when she believed that she was sacrificing her freedom for their lives. "He isn't," Nami whispered, she too recognized it. She knew that look in his eyes anywhere. For that same look had been on her mother's face as she stared down Arlong. "I think he is," Sanji gulped. Brook nodded as Ace's eyes widened, realizing what Sabo was about to do. He has to choose between his dreams, or his brother's lives. "There's really no other choice," Zoro said, feeling his respect for this little boy rise greatly. "No," Ace screamed out, "don't do it, Sabo." Sabo's mouth was trembling as he finally croaked out, "I'll do whatever you ask." Every word looked as if they were physically hurting him. "I'll live just as you tell me to, just, don't hurt these two. That's all I ask. Please, they are my irreplaceable." He paused for a fraction of a second before he finished, "brothers." Luffy and Ace were staring at Sabo, unable to believe what they were hearing. "Sabo," Ace whispered. "He's sacrificing everything," Nami whispered, staring at Sabo, giving up his own freedom for Luffy's and Ace's sake. Suddenly, everyone but Brook turned to look at Robin, who hadn't moved a muscle as she stared ahead, looking completely lost in thought. "There are some things more important than your own life," Robin said softly. "It's something I learned the hard way. It's not about staying alive. When you make a choice, you have to figure out what's most important to you. You have to be able to live with the choices you make and hope you don't regret it." "Robin-chan," Sanji said to her softly as Brook looked on in confusion. Sabo's father then said, "In that case, come back home now." He said it all in such a way that they knew that if Sabo said no, then he wouldn't hesitate in ordering Blue Jam to kill them. "Stop with this ridiculous pirate game, right now. It's not a ridiculous thing." Usopp yelled at him, wishing that he could say it to him face to face. Sabo took a deep breath, his lips stopped trembling as he held his head up. Sabo's really gonna leave?" Chopper whispered softly. "Like I said," Brook said, "he doesn't have a choice. It's the only way that all three of them can live." Nami's eyes widened at that, remembering hearing those exact same words when the Arlong pirates arrived at her home. How the doctor had pleaded with her and Nojiko to leave the island, how he explained how it would be the only way that the three of them could survive. Thinking back, she knew that he was right, though that didn't make it right. In the end, one of them was lost forever because of those pirates. Sabo didn't react at all. He didn't say anything, nor did he even look at anyone as he slowly turned and left with the soldiers, but as he left, they could see the tears in the corners of his eyes. His face was nothing but complete misery as he walked away from everything. His dreams, his hopes, his sworn family. Sabo. Usopp whispered, suddenly stunned by this show of trust and love that these three had. Sabo was willing to give up everything and go with his father, back to a life that he hated, all just to save the two he had come to see as his brothers. He and Chopper suddenly started to cry as the others stood there, staring at Sabo's retreating back. "Hey, Sabo, don't go," Ace screamed after him, but then the pirate that was holding him, slammed his face back into the ground again, warning him to stay quiet. Naturally, Ace kept screaming, "Sabo, just run." Sabo stopped for a moment, though he didn't look at them, they could tell that he was listening to every word he was saying. "We'll be fine. We were going to share our freedom together, remember? Sabo, don't go," Luffy begged out loudly, as if something was ripping out his heart. Ace then continued on, now sounding angry, "Are you going to let it end like this? Doesn't he understand that he's doing it for them?" Usopp asked. "He does," Nami said, her eyes blank, remembering this same helpless and angry feeling that had been in her heart when her mother gave up all the money she had for Arlong to spare her and Nojiko. "He just can't accept it." Sabo still refused to look at them, the tears now falling down his face, and it was clear to them that he wanted nothing more than to do that, to run away and never look back, but he still couldn't bring himself to do that. "Sabo!" Ace screamed the loudest one yet, but nothing he said could change this. He was trapped there, watching Sabo being led away by the soldiers. "Sabo!" Luffy screamed, fighting harder than ever to get himself up. As he watched this, Usopp felt ashamed. This kid was a bigger man than any of those damn nobles. He remembered how he was inspired by Luffy, Zoro and Nami and decided to go out to sea, following his dream of becoming a brave warrior of the sea. But this kid had more heart than anyone else he'd seen. As he continued to walk away, something small and broken fell out of Sabo's coat, and he stopped at that, looking ready to grab it. What it was actually made Nami cry. "That's," Frankie croaked out, able to believe it. "It's a telescope," Chopper cried out, feeling as though someone was squeezing his heart. He actually found a telescope for Luffy. But Sabo was pushed along while the soldiers stepped on it, breaking it even further so that it was just a smashed bit of metal and glass. Brook and Frankie had joined the weakling trio, as they cried. "Sabo!" Ace screamed out so loudly that it was as if he was trying to tear his throat, but still nothing. Sabo was led away, surrounded on all sides by guards as if he were a prisoner being led away to prison. Which, in a way, he was. Zoro lowered his head, shaking it softly. Was this why they never heard about Sabo from Luffy? Was this the last time that they ever saw him? He didn't want to think about it, but he couldn't see any other explanation. "That's got to be one of the noblest things I've ever seen," Frankie cried, pulling a handkerchief out and blowing his nose into it. "To give up your dreams all the sake of someone you love. Sabo, you're a true man." Sanji was now shaking in silent rage, feeling a deep surge of hatred well up inside him. He remembered those smart-ass, pompous jerks at the Baratie, he remembered how they felt like they could walk over everyone else and expect them to just deal with it. Lowlifes who think they're better than anything ticked him off more than anything. "Damn those nobles to hell," he growled, puffing harder than ever on his cigarette. "If they don't end up going there, I'm going to kick each and every one of them down there myself. Wish I could have a go at them all," Zoro said angrily, his hands itching for a chance to slice them all into pieces. Nami rubbed away the tears. Now she was willing to do almost anything for money. She had a bad habit of accepting any challenge that comes along so long as there was treasure at the end of it all. She loved money since she had grown up so poor, but the one thing she will not do is sell out a comrade. No matter what the sum. She is loyal to her money, but no matter how much she denies it, her loyalty to her friends comes first. As she watched Sabo's retreating back, heading to the wall to edge town, she knew that even with all the money that Sabo would be getting, the price would have been too high. Chopper gulped, suddenly having a hard time using his throat. Is that where Sabo is now?" he asked, looking at them all. "You think he's still in High Town?" "I'm afraid that's something that we can't answer you, Chopper," Robin said, watching Sabo disappear through the gate. She understood that feeling as well. Sabo couldn't even hope for a good tomorrow. "I think the only way we can really find out is to ask Luffy." "How are we supposed to ask him about this?" Usopp cried at him, rubbing his head and messing up his hair. "Damn, this was a bad idea. We shouldn't be here. We shouldn't have watched this. This isn't fun anymore. Let's get out of here before we see something we're really going to regret." "Captain," one of Blue Jam's crewmates said, "what do we do with the kids?" He jerked his head to the still struggling Ace, and Luffy who was staring after Sabo with tear-filled eyes. Blue Jam looked over them both before he said, "Bring them back to the base." And at those words, the memory went dark. "Hey wait," Brook called hurriedly. "Why didn't they let them go?" "Sabo went with them. You honestly expected them to fulfill their promise?" Frankie asked, looking over at Robin out of the corner of his eyes. Her own eyes were shadowed over by her hair as she kept her head down. "They agreed not to kill them," she said, her hands like fists as it brought back memories of Spandam. "But they never said that they'd let them go." "Why those lousy?" Sanji yelled out. The images came back, and they were now standing in a beaten-up old shack, much like the one where Luffy had been tortured by Porchami. Speaking of which, Luffy was tied back to back with Ace, and he glaring around at the pirates. Despite all that was happening, he showed no fear as he yelled at them all, "You bastards, untie us. Fight us again. This time we won't lose. He's got balls, you gotta give him that," Frankie said. "Why did you bring us here?" Ace demanded, his wrists working hard to break the rope. "This is their base," Usopp asked, staring around them. "What a dump," Zoro said, his eye narrowed at the pirates who were all smirking at the helpless boys, as if they knew something that they didn't. "You think that with the money that those nobles are paying them, they'd be able to afford better living conditions," Frankie said bitterly. "Those nobles have it made, huh? You kids think so too, right?" said Blue Jam's voice, and they turned to look behind them to see him in a chair large enough to support his bulk. He merely looked down at them both with that same smug look that made them all angry. "They better let them go if they know what's good for them," Usopp snapped. Enjoying his drink, Blue Jam then asked them, "They look down on all of us and think we're trash, while they live their proud, carefree lives. Wouldn't you say he's better off living as a noble?" "What the hell are you trying to say?" Ace demanded hotly, looking ready to fight. "Pirates are much better, of course," Luffy added, just as angrily. "Sabo thinks so too." Blue Jam didn't seem fazed by their words as he took another swig of his drink. "I feel sorry for you too," he said before glancing at some of his men. "Untie them." "Right," one guy answered as he pulled out a knife to cut the ropes. "He's letting them go," Nami said, startled. "There has to be some kinda catch," Sanji said frowning. "They wouldn't let them go after all the trouble of bringing them here." As soon as they were free, they jumped up, to face them all. Luffy was glaring around at them all, almost foaming at the mouth for a fight, while Ace just stood there stiff as a board. "Why do you think a child of a noble would leave Hightown and go to Grey Terminal?" Blue Jam asked them as if asking what the weather would be like tomorrow. "All nobles are the same, whether they be kids or adults." There's no doubt he thought we were all fools. In his heart, he was looking down on you as well. "Well, that's your opinion now, isn't it?" Frankie called out. "It doesn't matter." "Yeah, Sabo's not like that," Chopper cried out angrily. And they were glad to see that they weren't the only ones who thought so. "Don't be ridiculous," Ace yelled stubbornly. "Sabo isn't like that at all." "That's right," Luffy agreed without a shred of doubt, "we're brothers." Blue Jam looked ready to laugh as he waved his hand down at them. "Is that so?" he asked sarcastically, "then please forgive me. But you two won't ever be going near that kid again, will you? If you're planning to do that, I've got no choice but to kill you right here. If you think he's your brother, then it's better for him too if you left him alone." "Does he really think that they would abandon him?" Brook demanded darkly. "If we know Luffy, then no," Zoro answered him. "But if they do try to take him back, then they'll kill them," Nami said anxiously. "Just how are they going to get out of it?" But Zoro didn't answer her, he was distracted by Ace's sudden expression, as if he was thinking over what Blue Jam just said. Zoro frowned, wondering just what was going through Ace's head at that moment. Luffy however wasn't even listening as he declared, "But Sabo hates Hightown." Blue Jam laughed, clearly not understanding why anyone wouldn't choose to be a noble. "Just forget all about that," he said. "That's what kindness is. You'll understand when you're grown up." "Oh, right," he added, thinking something over. He then leaned back in his seat and asked, "We've had our differences in the past, what with that Portuguese incident, but what's past is past." He then grinned almost evilly and added, "Or rather, I like strong guys like you. So, I've got a suggestion for you. It's not a half-bad deal." "A deal?" Chopper asked, confused. "What kind of deal?" Nami asked, having been forced to make a lot of deals with pirates when she was still a thief. Of course, she also knew that those pirates never intended to keep their end of the bargain, so she learned to take what she could and leave before things got ugly. "Whatever it is, I don't think they should take it. They should just leave when they get the chance and forget about them." "That would be the best course of action," Robin agreed. "I'm short on men at the moment," Blue Jam said. "Will you help me with a job?" The suggestion took, not only Luffy and Ace, but the rest of the Straw Hats by surprise. "Is he serious?" Usopp cried out incredulously. "What's he thinking? After everything that's happened, after they helped to take their brother away, what makes him think that they'll help them with anything? Not only that, but they were going to kill them earlier." Chopper added. "That might make it hard being friends," Zoro said lightly. "What is with you?" Usopp said to him, "Can't you at least try to act concerned?" "Oh, it's a simple job," Blue Jam reassured them, "there's nothing dangerous about it." "Well, that doesn't sound so bad," Chopper said slowly. "Which is why we shouldn't trust him?" Frankie asked, moving his sunglasses up so that he could glare at Blue Jam. "I've got a bad feeling about this." Blue Jam gestured to the barrel in front of him where a knife held a map covered in dozens of X's all over. Nami quickly looked over it before blinking in surprise. "It looks like," but before she could finish, Blue Jam had finished speaking. "I got a map of Grey Terminal here," he said, waving dismissively at the map. "You've got to carry some goods to the spots marked with an X. That's all. Are you up for it?" "That's it?" Nami asked. "Though it sure sounds easy, what's it about?" Usopp said darkly. I smell a rat, Sanji agreed, not liking the suspicious looks on each of the pirates' faces. These guys are planning something and I bet you all anything it has to do with these goods of theirs. But what could they be carrying? Brook asked, looking at all the X's and asked, you think that it's treasure? Like they would be delivering treasure where they know 2 boys who had robbed from them before would be helping them. Nami demanded. Besides, Zoro added, watching Blue Jam roll up the map after pulling his knife out of it. They were all over the map. What kind of pirate spreads treasure out in so many places? Then what could it be? Brook asked them. Something dangerous is my best bet, Robin said. In any case, they should just leave. They don't want to be part of this. Luffy looked as if he was about to do that, but the biggest surprise yet came from Ace, who said, all right. They all stared at him, Luffy included, staring at Ace as if seeing him for the first time. How much will you pay us? Blue Jam just smirked a little wider, and that was when the familiar darkness took over. I don't believe it. Frankie called angrily as they were left in the darkness again. What was he thinking? He agreed to something that is clearly nothing good just like that. Nami screamed out. Not that they have much other choice, Robin pointed out. Even if they said no, I doubt that they'll let them go that easily. I don't like this, Brook said, hugging his feathered boa around himself as if hoping that he could keep warm. It gives my skin goosebumps, not that I have skin to begin with, yo-ha-ho-ho. No offense, Brook, Sanji said darkly, but no one's in the mood for a joke. But Sabo? Chopper asked, bringing them back to the matter at hand. I want to know about Sabo. If he's as wild as his brothers, I'm sure that he'll make a break for it as soon as he gets the chance, Nami comforted him. You think so? Chopper asked, suddenly feeling a little better. I hope so. I like Sabo, and there's no way that they'd leave him alone like that if Sabo really hates it. You saw how close they are. Usopp said stubbornly. Like they'd sell out one of their own. But still, I think that I've had enough of Luffy's memories. I'm with you there, Nami said. I learned more than I ever wanted to about Luffy. But aren't you curious about Sabo? Chopper asked her. Of course I am, Nami said at once. But come on, Luffy never bugged us about our pasts. I don't want to know anymore. Again, how the hell do we get out of here? Zoro demanded. I'm all for getting out of Luffy's head, if that's where we are, but we're still stuck here. Of course, before anyone could come up with any helpful suggestions, the memory came back and the first thing they saw was Luffy and Ace walking side by side, carrying several small crates, each one that had a small pole attached with a little red flag. Most of Blue Jam's crew was surrounding them, keeping a close eye on the boys to make sure that didn't run off. Luffy stuck close to Ace, with a frown that clearly said that he didn't want to be here. Ace just kept shooting the men dark glares, just daring them to try something. I'm guessing that these are the goods that Blue Jam mentioned. Frankie asked, looking at them all suspiciously. What's in there? Sanji asked with a frown as they walked alongside them. Chopper was sniffing the air a little. It's hard to tell, he answered them, but I'm picking up traces of gunpowder. Gunpowder? Usopp repeated in surprise. Yeah, Chopper nodded. It's hard to smell anything here in a memory, but I can also pick up traces of oil in there too. Gunpowder and oil, Zoro said slowly, not liking where this was going. But if that's true, why are they putting them all over the Grey Terminal? Nami asked nervously. Ace, Luffy finally whined to him, carefully moving to look at him since there was a crate balancing on top of his head. I don't like it when Sabo's not around. Ace didn't even look at him as he said in a harsh tone, just deal with it. I want to go get Sabo too. But I don't know what would really make Sabo happy. What's he saying? Nami demanded, getting angry again. He's not seriously thinking that Blue Jam was right as he. I mean, even Luffy sees that guy's rotten to the core. It's hard to say at this point, Robin stated, looking at the sad look on Luffy's face. They're not at all happy about this, but they aren't sure what to do. So what, they're just gonna leave him there? Usopp demanded, unable to believe what he was hearing. After everything they've been through. Yes, but it is understandable, Robin offered. After all, Sabo does have parents, money, a home. It would be hard to walk away from all that unless you are completely miserable. Yeah, but don't forget that Sabo said so himself how miserable he was with them. Frankie pointed out. Let's see how things go, Ace said, more to himself than to Luffy. He's strong. If he isn't happy, he's sure to come back to us. We have to keep collecting the pirate fund in case the time comes. That's true, Usopp said slowly, thinking over. I didn't think about that. I doubt those nobles be able to hold him in for long. But that would be dangerous, Nami said at once. If he does escape, then they'll know that he'll go back to Luffy and Ace. And then they'd. You don't think they'd kill them? Chopper cried out in panic. They would have done it if Sabo didn't agree to go back in the first place, Sanji said, feeling more frustrated at every second. But then what are they supposed to do? Brook asked weakly. The only way that the three of them can live is for Sabo to stay in Hightown and for Luffy and Ace to stay away, Robin whispered. Other than just leaving this island completely, I see no other way to ensure their safety. And even if they did leave, there's always a chance that they'd find them. But that's not fair. Chopper cried out. Then there's nothing that anyone can do. It's impossible to say, Zoro said, sounding grim as the darkness faded so that they could see the next scene. They realized that it was night, and they were back at the treehouse. Peeking in, they could see that the two boys were laying there in the mess of blankets, Ace on his side, turned away from Luffy, who was gazing up at the wall above him with a sad look. Following his gaze, they spotted an old clock that obviously came from the gray terminal. It had a chunk of it taken out, but it still seemed to be working. It was past midnight, and through the feeble moonlight through the glassless window, there was a small net that held the 3 red sake glasses the boys had shared when they declared themselves brothers. I never knew that they held onto those, Nami said softly. I wonder what Sabo's doing. Luffy said quietly, to no one in particular. It was very strange to see such a gloomy and unhappy Luffy, compared to the happy and energetic child they had been seeing, and the happy-go-lucky captain that they knew all too well. Shut up, Ace sighed next to him, obviously still awake, just sleep now. Luffy looked at Ace grimly, staring at his brother's back, just waiting for him to speak. We promised we'd forget about Sabo for now, right? Ace asked him, almost sounding like a recording. So sleep. Alright, Luffy said, closing his eyes. That's a first, Sanji said, breathing hard on his cigarette, Luffy doing what he's told. I just think he's not in the mood for anything else, Brook sighed, knowing how painful it was to miss someone and how much hard work it was to try and do anything when you're feeling depressed. As Luffy started to doze off and the memory started to turn hazy, they heard Ace whisper, he might be happier this way. Who other than a stuck-up noble could be happy in that place? Frankie demanded in a hiss. Luffy sighed softly. Sabo. Ace sighed as he sat up, looking over to him, probably to tell him to be quiet and to go to sleep again. Luffy, he said, only to see that Luffy was already pretty much sleeping. Telescope, he muttered in his sleep. He still wants that telescope. Sanji asked in amazement. Usopp remembered how he planned on designing that special telescope for them all to use when he got back, and was now starting to plan it over again. He looked over at Frankie, the two of them sharing a silent agreement to start working on one when they find their way back to their ship. Ace just sighed tiredly as he pulled Luffy's blankets up around him before he laid back down and the memory faded quickly again. This is really getting dangerous, Robin said grimly. They shouldn't go back. I don't care how much money they're promised. How can they ever think that they'll keep their word anyway? Nami demanded as the memory changed quickly this time so that they were standing somewhere in the gray terminal, near the sea where a large pirate ship painted red and a gruesome red skull out front. It appeared to be the late afternoon, and there were Luffy and Ace with the rest of the Blue Jam pirates, and they seemed to be talking. What a crappy ship, Frankie frowned at it. Honestly, don't these guys even bother to take care of her? I want to know what's going on here, Usopp said fearfully. Everything's ready, boss, one of the pirates said with a proud grin. We're all set. All we need is the signal and everything's ready to go. Good, Blue Jam grinned back. Well done. And hopefully, this will be the last job that we'll do as the Blue Jam pirates. Luffy and Ace looked at him in surprise. What? Ace questioned skeptically. You mean you're quitting being pirates? Why would you do that? Luffy demanded, in a tone that he couldn't believe anyone would want to give up being a pirate. Yeah, why? Chopper demanded. Because there's no more need for it, Blue Jam answered in a bored tone. We were made an offer that we couldn't refuse. Now that it's almost over, we have no more need to stay as criminals. Idiots, Ace snapped. You all honestly think that you're gonna retire just like that? He makes a fair point, Brook said. Once you leave and become a pirate, you normally can't ever return to a normal life. Now that we're finished, might as well tell you everything, Blue Jam declared. He grinned evilly and said, with no hint of a joke in his tone, tonight, we're gonna set off those packages. And when we do, the gray terminal will be nothing but a pile of ashes by tomorrow morning. The Straw Hats' eyes all widened in horror as they realized what those boxes of gunpowder and oil were for. They're going to, Nami whispered, her eyes widening and sweat pouring down her face. What are you talking about? Luffy demanded hotly. Don't you understand? Blue Jam demanded, rolling his eyes. We're going to burn down the gray terminal. Huh, burn down gray terminal? Ace demanded in horror, sure that he must have heard wrong. Why are you doing that? They're gonna destroy it, Chopper cried out. But why do that? What's the point? You fool, don't scream. Blue Jam scolded, looking around to make sure that no one else could hear them. We can't let anyone else know about this. Not let anyone else know. Usopp cried, remembering all the marks on that map, and just how much explosives must have been in each one of those crates. If he sets all those things off, then the entire terminal will be going up in flames. Sanji's cigarette dropped from his mouth. And everyone in it as well. But why would they do something so terrible? Brook called in panic. This is serious. We gotta tell everyone. Luffy yelled, looking ready to start running and screaming out what was going to happen to everyone he saw. He's a bad guy, just as I thought. For once, I have to agree with him, Sanji said. It was strange seeing Luffy as the rational one here. I told you not to scream, Blue Jam said firmly, looking to his men and telling them to hold them down. Two of them came forward and grabbed the boys from behind and held tight as they fought and struggled to get free. But I don't get it, Frankie yelled. Why destroy the terminal? What's the point? But then Blue Jam answered his question. He repeated, I'm not the mastermind. But who would hire them to do something like this? Usopp cried out, still staring at him in horror, as Ace stopped struggling, freezing where he was as he listened. There was oil and explosives in the boxes that you guys carried yesterday and today, Blue Jam confessed with a sick smile. The boys had turned pale at the thought, understanding what they had done and their part in it. It's not their faults, Nami said at once, they didn't know. But they still feel responsible for helping them, Zoro said darkly. Not that I think Blue Jam needed the help in moving those crates, but the idea alone is enough to make them feel guilty. But can't someone explain who's behind this? Usopp called loudly as Brook and Chopper cried out in fear. Who would want the terminal burned to crisp? I think I might have an answer, Robin answered, her eyes turning to the wall, where the nobles were living. I just hope that I'm wrong. But Robin, why? Chopper began just as Blue Jam started to laugh. There will be a massive fire that no one can escape from, he continued to explain to the boys with that same grin. It was clear that he couldn't have cared less for what they were doing. They're really going to kill everyone here. Nami cried out, thinking of all the people they saw rummaging through the junk here. Those soulless bastards don't deserve to live, Sanji growled, fire already appearing near his legs. If we ever meet up with them for real in life, I'm going to kill them all. Only if you save Blue Jam for me, Zoro told him, his hand on his sword. This is bad, Chopper cried out, tears now forming. Those people are all going to be burned to death. I can't think of a worse way to go. To disregard the lives of innocent people. Brook called furiously. No, Luffy whispered softly, voicing what they were all thinking, his eyes widening in alarm. Are you out of your mind? Ace screamed out, now fighting harder than ever to break free. But all Blue Jam did was laugh, which only caused them all to become even angrier. For Nami, that laugh was too similar to Arlong's laugh, the one he used after he killed her mother. One that sometimes still haunted her nightmares. These men were just like them. Evil monsters. Even punk kids like you two are freaking out. He asked smugly. But now you know about the plan. He calmly walked towards them both. We can't let that go. I was afraid of that, Robin said softly. So they're really gonna kill them? Usopp screamed out. Ah, Luffy-san and Ace-san are dead meat. Brook called. They are. Chopper screamed. Would you all calm down? Sanji yelled. They don't die, remember. Why not just let them go? Frankie called out. It's not like they can stop it now, can they? And I doubt that anyone will believe them, but at least they can give them all a warning before it's too late. I wonder just what those scumbags were promised to agree to all this, Zoro said softly. I want to ask you something before the fire, Blue Jam said casually, bending down to eye level with them. Say you too, do you have a treasure hidden away somewhere? He's asking about that now at a time like this. Sanji cried out. Ace glared at him angrily, keeping his mouth shut, but Blue Jam already knew that they did. Care to tell me where? He asked them. Predictably, Ace didn't say anything as his cold eyes continued to glare into his own. But Blue Jam didn't seem interested as he stood up tall again. Fine, don't tell me, he answered them, waving his hand to his men and gave them their orders, tie them to the ship. They can burn with the rest of the garbage. What? Screeched most of the Straw Hats at that as the boys were taken inside and they had to run after them to see what was happening. He's really just gonna let them burn like this? Usopp called. Of course they are, Nami whispered softly, painful flashbacks of her miserable 8 years working for Arlong came flooding back. Men like him don't care how many lives they ruin. Men, Brook demanded. They're no men. Cowards more like it. You're letting your own ship burn as well. Ace yelled at him as they were being tied to a post, Luffy kicking and screaming the whole time. How are you all gonna get away? That's a good question, Frankie said, but still, this ship is almost worn through. I doubt that it'll make it far anyway. No point, Blue Jam told him, we won't need it anymore. How could they just abandon their own ship like this? Usopp screamed out, thinking of the Mary and her sacrifice for them. Won't need it, Nami whispered, before getting angry again, what's going on here? But no one could answer her as they could only stand back and watch as the boys were tied to the post and left there. They sat there the whole time, both of them struggling to free themselves. For hours they fought and pulled at the ropes, desperate to get out, the whole time they could hear the wind blowing outside, growing stronger and stronger with each passing second. Disclaimer: this story do not belong to me. The author is Warm Memories and Brotherly Bonds by RoseDragonWitch. Chapter 10. Goodbye Sabo, my brother. This isn't good, Usopp said nervously, hearing the wind picking up outside, rattling the walls with such force that it felt like it was going to blow away. At this rate the fire is going to spread so quickly, Nami whispered, going out to check the weather and frowned heavily at what she saw. She came back in and quickly explained, the wind's blowing off from the sea, and if tonight's like this, along with all the explosives we saw, then the whole terminal will be covered in flames in a matter of minutes. So they're really gonna let them burn to death? Brook called fearfully as the boys continued to fight tooth and nail to cut themselves free. Those bastards, Frankie growled, cracking his robotic knuckles together. If I ever meet them, I'm gonna shove my foot so far up his. Luffy, Ace called desperately, unknowingly interrupting Frankie. He had been looking around for something and spotted a window down near the far end of the hideout. Luffy, who was crying, stopped and turned his head as far around as he could to listen. See that window back there? Ace asked him quickly. Yeah, Luffy asked, sniffling as he looked down at, not understanding, but why? I get it, Robin said, if they can get a shard of glass they can use it to cute the ropes. And if Luffy could get his body to stretch out and break it. Sanji said, a smile coming back to his face. Genius. Do you think you can stretch your arm out and break it? Ace asked, still pulling on the rope. I don't know. Luffy said, trying to move his fingers, but was bound so tightly that it was almost impossible. Well, try something. Ace snapped at him. If you can't use your hands then try your feet or something. Okay. He gasped out, moving his foot up as high as he could. He then stuck his tongue out as he concentrated, kicking out foot as far as he could go. Like a rubber band, his foot shot out, but fell several feet short of the window. Damn it, Zoro said frowning, now starting to feel apprehensive. This wasn't good. Luffy still didn't have too much control over his own powers, and time wasn't on their side. If they didn't hurry, then they'd be going down in flames, literally. Try it again, Ace called, and though he sounded calm, they could see the panic starting to rise in his eyes. I'm trying, Luffy said fearfully, pulling his leg back so that he could try again. They gotta hurry, Usopp said, biting his nails, cringing every time he heard the wind knock into the hideout. I'm sure that they make it out in time, Robin said, though even she sounded a little unnerved. They're not the type of people who give up easily. Come on, Luffy, Chopper called, now cheering Luffy on. I know you can do it. Sanji puffed harder than ever on his cigarette as he glanced through the window and at the slowly darkening sky. If I had to guess, they're sure to set off those crates when it's dark and everyone's sleeping. That way, by the time they woke up and realized they were in trouble, the fire would cut off any escape route and they have nowhere to go, Robin agreed. That sounds like that's how they do this. That's horrible, Chopper yelled furiously. But what's the point? Brook repeated for what felt like the millionth time. Why would anyone want to do this? Dunno, Sanji said, but Blue Jam doesn't seem smart enough to have come up with a plan like this. He did say that he wasn't the one behind this, Nami whispered to herself as Luffy kicked out again. Usopp and Chopper both cheered, but their voices died out when Luffy missed out. He was closer than he was before, but was nowhere close. Come on, Ace said, breathing hard. If you don't wanna die, then put some effort into it. I don't wanna die, Luffy yelled out in panic. Then kick that window out. Ace yelled at him. Break that glass and pull back a piece and I'll take it from there. Okay, Luffy yelled back, just stop yelling at me. While I think that Ace could have handled it better, he gets to the point, Frankie said bitterly. Luffy tried again and again to reach the window, and each time he got closer, but each time he seemed to get more frustrated so that he looked ready to cry. The feeble light through that window was quickly fading and the sounds of chirping crickets could be heard outside. It was so quiet, no one could ever imagine what was about to happen. And as Nami predicted, the wind hadn't died down. If anything, it had picked up and was now rattling the ground as well as the walls. Come on, Luffy-san, Brook encouraged the little boy, hoping that he could somehow hear him. You're almost there. That was the closest one yet. Ace was listening hard to every little sound, looking around hurriedly as if he thought that there were ghosts hiding in the corners. Come on, Luffy, he said loudly, we don't have time for this. If we want to get out of here and see Sabo again, then we have to get out now. I know, Luffy said, panting softly, but there was determination in his face. I can do this. Yes, Captain, Robin whispered softly. The future captain that she knew had never thrown the towel in with anything he'd done in life, so it only made sense that he was just as stubborn as a child. Luffy was breathing hard, determined to get out now. This time he put his feet together, the bottoms of each touching, and this time he kicked them both simultaneously. Gum gum, spear, he cried out, and this time, he stretched farther than ever. The sound of the window breaking as his feet went smashing through it was more than enough to renew their optimism. Good going, Ace called, a little hope now shining in his eyes as he twisted around to get a good look, and saw the large shards falling to the floor. He did it, Nami said smiling, they might make it out of here after all. But no sooner she said that did they hear it. Somewhere far off, they could hear the defiant sounds of explosions and they froze, the smiles quickly fading. Gasping, Usopp went running to the window and looked out to see for himself. Hell, they're out of time, Sanji called out anxiously. Shit, Ace called out, hearing the noise and now fighting harder than ever. We took too long. Luffy, grab a shard and let's get out of here. Right, Luffy said, and he was able to carefully pick up a large shard with his toes before his feet snapped back. As his legs returned to its normal size, the glass shard fell near their hands so that Ace was able to grab hold of it and immediately began sawing away at their bindings. But soon they could see the light shining through, glowing red like a sunset, but they could hear several more explosions setting off much closer than before, and knew that it was only a matter of time before it reached the boys. The fire will be here in minutes. Nami cried out just as Luffy started crying again when he heard the next round of explosions going off closer than ever. Ace kept calm as he continued to cut through, but the longer they stuck around, the hotter the room seemed to become and the thicker the air. At this rate, the fire will get through those ropes faster than Ace will, Robin said. Why must you tell us things like that? Usopp cried out as Chopper began screaming. Relax, Zoro said, though he was gritting his teeth together as they continued to watch Ace struggling, squeezing down on the shard so tightly that he was cutting his hand. Suddenly, a part of the roof started cracking and with an almighty crash it caved in. Thankfully, the boys were far enough away from it that it didn't fall on top of them, but the fire was now inside the hideout and was now licking the walls, creeping across the floor and smoke was filling up the space. At the sight of the fire, Brook, Usopp, and Chopper screamed out, backing away. The rest of them stayed far back, but they couldn't feel anything. Even when Sanji was brave enough to venture close to the fire and let it lick his lower leg, he felt nothing but air. At the sight of the flames, Luffy was screaming out in terror, but unlike them, he could feel the heat and was breathing in the smoke. The fire spread rapidly through the rest of the place, the wood breaking apart and turning to ash, burning higher and hotter with each second. Come on Ace. Usopp cried out, the room filled with so much smoke that it was getting harder to see anything. Luffy was now in full freak out, screaming out, it's hot. It's hot. But with one final slash, Ace was able to cut the bonds and they fell away from the post. He did it. Chopper called out, tears of relief in his eyes. Yeah, but they're far from out of danger. Frankie yelled out as the rest of the roof was creaking dangerously. They got to get out of here. If the fire didn't spread all the way here, they might be able to get out, Nami said as Ace pulled the ropes away and stood up. Damn, he cried out, staring around him, looking for the way out. We didn't want to be involved in this. Luffy was still on the floor, now smashing his little fists against it, screaming out, we can't get away. I don't wanna die. It was strange to see Luffy as such a helpless child, but they couldn't blame him either as the fire continued to grow. What are they waiting for? They gotta get out now. Frankie screamed, seeing the roof breaking apart. Another minute and they'll be trapped. Ace spotted their pipe staffs on the floor near the doorway and then screamed at Luffy to stop complaining if he didn't want to be left behind. At once, Luffy stopped crying and said, sucking his lips in, it's not hot. Harsh but effective, Frankie said, even with all this, sweat dropped at that. They don't have time for a debate here. Zoro called out, as Ace grabbed Luffy by the back of his shirt and pulled him to the door, grabbing the staffs as he did so. He tossed Luffy his and they went running out through the door just as they heard the rest of the hideout fall apart. That's a close call if ever I've seen one, Nami cried out as they ran after the boys from the house. But the outside world was even worse. The fire had spread quicker than they thought. The trash surrounding them was now an inferno and Trash Mountain was quickly being reduced to ash as the smoke picked up and made it impossible to see farther than a few yards. The fire was melting the scraps into pools of liquid burning metal, paper and wood acted as kindling, and there were still minor explosives coming from inside the mountains of junk from whatever volatiles were thrown out with the junk. It's like we're in hell. Usopp screamed out, dodging the falling burning pieces, though there was no need. Up there, Robin told them, keeping up with Luffy and Ace. Whoa, it's hot. Luffy cried out, the fire grazing his skin, before he realized what he said and cried out, no it's not. There's fire everywhere. Ace cried out, wiping the sweat out of his eyes as he took the lead and went running down the pathway with Luffy on his heels. This is terrible. Brook called out, wishing that the darkness would come so that they couldn't see this anymore. I can't tell where anything is. How do they know where they're going? Usopp shouted. I don't think they do. In this smoke they'll be disorientated. Chopper cried out, it's confusing them and they could be running around in circles for all we know. As the boys continued to run, Luffy was gasping for breath, going back and forth between keeping calm and freaking out. I can't breathe, before remembering what Ace said before and crying out instead, yes I can. But as he breathed in, he coughed and gasped out, the air is hot. No, it's not. While I admire him trying to stay calm, now isn't the time, Zoro said, staring around him, cursing himself for not being able to sense anything here. Damn, I can't tell where anything is here. Not that means much, Sanji said, your sense of direction would only kill them faster even if you were there. What was that you idiot cook? He yelled. Bring it on Moss Head. Sanji yelled. Shut up both of you. Usopp screamed out. We have bigger problems. Ace moved back from some burning metal as Luffy continued to try and keep himself calm. He didn't look at his little brother, but he spoke in a voice that they hadn't heard yet from the child Ace. It was, oddly gentle. A more comforting voice than the one he usually used with Luffy. It's going to be alright, he said softly, though still firm at the same time, I'm here with you. Zoro's eye widened a little before a small smile played on his lips, the first smile he had since before Sabo was taken away. Looks like Ace finally found something he wanted to protect. He was going to use his strength to keep his brother safe. At his tone, Luffy looked a little surprised as well at the sudden change in Ace, but he gulped down and nodded a little as he calmed down and continued to follow after him, much more serious than he had been, but in control of his emotions. I'm amazed at how Ace can do that, Nami said, gasping for air as she ran with them. I mean, not even we can talk like that to Luffy and have that much of an effect. Bond between brothers, Robin smiled as she went running right through a fireball, it almost makes me jealous. Onwards they ran, though it was getting harder to tell where they were going. The gray terminal fire was growing, and even for the Straw Hats, who were breathing clear air and able to run through fire, it was impossible for them to tell where anything was. They could only imagine how bad it was for the two brothers. Run, Luffy, Ace called. I can't go any faster than this. He cried back, but still he pumped his legs harder. Why don't they try rocketing out of here? Brook suggested. With what? Nami demanded. There's nothing for him to grab onto that isn't already burning. And they don't know where they are. They could end up going the wrong way and into a place where they'd be surrounded. If they can get back to the middle forest, then there's a chance. But isn't a forest the worst possible place to be during a fire? Usopp cried out. Normally yes, she gasped out, jumping over a melting pipe. But with the wind on the sea, the fire most likely hasn't spread near the forest yet. If they can get there, they should have a clear path up to the mountains. They should be safe there. Come on guys, Chopper called to them, almost willing them to run faster. However, just as he called out, the top of one of the towers of debris crumbled and fell towards Luffy. Luffy didn't notice it until it was just above them. Luffy, Zoro, Nami, and Usopp screamed out, just as Luffy screamed, suddenly unable to move. At his cry, Ace looked back and saw what was happening. With inhuman speed, he jumped, tackling Luffy and rolled them out of the way as the flaming wreckage reduced the ground to charcoal almost on impact. Nice save, Ace, Usopp called, his heart beating so fast that he thought that it was about to burst. He didn't know how much more he could take of this. Luffy, Ace gasped, quickly pulling Luffy back from the fire as it blocked the way they came from. Are you okay? Luffy only nodded, trying to hold back the tears as Ace hugged him tightly, his eyes wide with emotions they hadn't seen before. Terror, fear, protectiveness. He was scared, really scared. Ace, Luffy cried out, biting down hard on his lips to keep him from screaming out. I told you, didn't I? Ace asked him harshly, leading him back down the path. I'm here with you, okay? Now there's the Ace that we met in Alabasta, Sanji said, smiling in spite of himself. Nothing can bring people together like almost dying together, Robin proclaimed as Usopp shivered. Robin, you have to stop that, Frankie said as Chopper cried out for them to keep running. Onwards they ran, the smoke thicker than ever, now almost completely surrounded on all sides by fire. Pulling his goggles down, Usopp tried to get a better view on where they were. Desperately searching, he spotted something just through the thick smoke, and he cried out in joy as he realized what it was. There, Usopp called, recognizing the trees that towered over them. They're almost out. But Ace was forced to jump back as another pile of burning wood almost hit him. Luffy was looking around. I wonder if those old men escaped safely. This is no time to be concerned about other people. Ace yelled at him, straining his eyes as he stared around, searching for the right way. Even after all this, he's still worried about everyone else. Frankie asked, suddenly deeply touched by that. How can he be worrying about others when they're shit deep in all this? Sanji asked, he's too nice sometimes. What a pain. He's a pain all right, Nami said, smiling at her captain's big heart, but we wouldn't want him any other way, right? Nope, Zoro answered almost teasingly, why else would we let him be captain? By now, Ace was coughing violently, bringing them back to what was happening here. This is getting worse, Chopper said, his eyes almost budging out of his head. They've been here too long. All this smoke. Any longer and they won't be able to breathe. And if that happens they'll pass out and be burned to death, Robin said, freaking some of her crewmates out, but even she was sounding concerned. Damn, Ace cursed, struggling for air. I don't know where I am. Just run forward, Usopp told them. You're almost out. Almost as if he heard him that time, Ace stepped forward, but before he could start running they heard someone yell behind them, who said you could get away, you brats. The Straw Hats felt themselves freeze, which was ironic considering where they were, but they knew that voice. Slowly turning, they spotted them coming after them from the flames. Like demons from the pits of hell, they came at them. Each carrying a weapon, their eyes oddly blank, and twisted smiles on their faces, as if they were loving every minute of this hellish world. Blue Jam, Luffy exclaimed in shock. What the hell are they doing back here? Usopp yelled, taking a step back. I thought that they cleared out long ago. Yeah, they sure seemed keen about escaping before, Frankie hollered out. Ace was as stunned as the rest of them, but it quickly turned to anger. Why are you still here after setting the fire? He screamed out, you were supposed to have escaped by now. My bet is that these idiots couldn't get out, Zoro said. Most likely they set off too much explosives and were trapped, Robin said, though even she doubted her own words. She did not like those insane looks of delight on their faces. Oh, shut up, you little shit. Blue Jam shouted, taking them all by surprise. What's going on here? Zoro shouted out. Before Blue Jam had always been sadistic and cruel, but in a cool and collected way as if he planned everything out. But here, he was raging and storming in annoyance. All at once, he suddenly started that grin again. It sent shivers down Zoro's spine. He knew that something was wrong. We're hopeless, you know, Blue Jam chuckled. For once, they're making sense, Sanji said, throwing his cigarette away as he watched. We have an unforeseen dilemma, Blue Jam went on. Human or strange creatures, aren't they? When you hit rock bottom, you can't stop laughing. What's with them? Usopp asked, as the rest of Blue Jam's crew all started to laugh along with him, their smiles almost fake now. They're creeping me out. They are acting weird, Luffy whispered nervously to Ace, not liking this either. They're not well, Brook said. The look in their eyes was much different from before, changed, almost, possessed even. Nami's eyes widened. Oh, no, she whispered so softly that she wasn't sure they heard her. They've gone insane. What? Usopp asked just as Ace's eyes widened and he cried out for Luffy to run. Don't let them go, Blue Jam ordered as the two ran in the opposite direction. Now, even the fire seemed safer than with these pirates. What's going on? Chopper asked. They're not normal. They've lost their minds, Robin said frowning as the whole crew surrounded the boys, not letting them pass. I don't know how, but they've become like demons now. There's no humanity left in them now. Man, this just keeps getting worse all the time. Frankie yelled, now sounding close to losing his mind as well. I don't see how it could get any. Don't say it can't get worse because it just might. Usopp yelled. But you just said it. Chopper yelled at him as he hit himself in the head. Blue Jam slowly lumbered forward to them. Now, he said still smiling, we work together, we're friends. We have to die together. Nami stood back, now feeling terrified at what was going to happen next. This guy's scaring me, Usopp said, sweat pouring down his long nose. He's seriously sick here. We don't wanna die with you. Ace snapped. Not in a million years. Seriously, who'd wanna die with him anyway? Sanji asked, though there was anxiety in his tone. You're so cold, Blue Jam said, still grinning as he walked forward. Come to think of it, you haven't told me where you keep your treasure. I'll save it for you before the fire gets it. So tell me where it is. Wait a minute, Frankie said, incredulously. You mean that he came back here just to get the money? Ace obviously felt the same way because he was crying out in disbelief, your life in danger and all you care about is treasure. I see, and I thought that Nami-san was greedy, Brook said, and Nami kicked him hard in the head so that he hit the ground with a painful bang. My priorities are always life first and then money. She yelled at him. True, Usopp said, she always made someone else risk their life, and then steal the money when no one else was looking. He didn't dare say this out loud because Brook was whimpering on the ground. Blue Jam laughed harder before asking, if you don't care, then tell me where it is. Ace's eyes darkened. You've gone mad. If you're not going to get it, it'd be a waste, Blue Jam said in a strangely calm voice, clumsily moving a little closer. If nothing is done, it's going to be reduced to charcoal like my ship. What a waste. Wait, I thought that he didn't care about his ship. Usopp said quickly. That piece of shit, Frankie growled, furious that anyone could treat a ship, a work of art, in such a manner. Then again, it's out of its misery. If I had to be the ship of a bunch of low-life murderers like them, then I'd probably want someone to finish me off. Don't be ridiculous. Luffy yelled out at him, and they all suddenly reminded it how hard Luffy fought to keep that a secret from Porchimi. That treasure is. Alright, I'll tell you, Ace interrupted loudly. Chopper called out. But they all worked so hard to get that treasure. Chopper, Zoro said firmly, leaving no room for an argument, it's just a pile of gold. It's not worth dying over. Nami didn't say anything, but though she knew he was right, she couldn't bring herself to say it out loud. Perhaps it was habit, but she couldn't bear the thought of anyone leaving money like that behind. But this time she'd let it slide. Of course she'd much rather that Luffy and Ace escape alive, even if a bastard like Blue Jam did end up with all of it. She supposed that they could always go out and steal more if they made it out in one piece. Ace, Luffy yelled, you and Sabo spent a lot of time. Sabo would understand. Ace yelled at him, and Luffy stopped to stare at him. Ace kept his back to him as he continued to glare at the pirates. What matters the most now is he stopped there for a second before he corrected, what matters the most now is our lives. The Straw Hats all stared at Ace's resolve. They didn't miss that little slip up and it was all clear to them. Right now, Ace no longer cared what happened to him, here, he was thinking of Luffy, and Luffy alone. He's not thinking about himself here, is he? Brook asked softly. Right now, he wants to get Luffy out of here, Sanji explained quietly. He probably feels like it's his fault that they're in this mess since he was the one who agreed to work for scum like them in the first place. There's a chance that he feels like he couldn't live with himself if Luffy got hurt because of him. Moss Head was right for once, it's just money. It's not worth dying over. Luffy sniffled a little as tears quickly dried up in his eyes from the heat. It was hard to tell whether he was sad over the money, or he noticed the slip up in Ace's words. Ace, he said softly, before he blinked the tears away and glared at Bluejam. Ace then walked over to a pile of junk that was left mostly unburned and picked up a piece of wood. If I tell you, you have to promise to let us go, he said to them all firmly. Bluejam merely grinned at that as the other pirates all looked on eagerly as Ace quickly drew up a crude map using a charcoal burnt stick as a pencil. Zoro couldn't help but feel deeply impressed at how calm Ace was here as he finished up the map by drawing an X on the tree. You know, he could always lie about where he hid it, Nami added hopefully, just draw any tree there. It's not worth it, Nami, Robin said, besides, they might think they're lying about it. Wait, he's gonna let them go, isn't he? Chopper called out worried. I highly doubt it, Sanji said, gritting his teeth together. But hey, if they're this insane, they might be able to get away before they notice it. Ace finally handed the wooden map over. We keep our treasure from the last 6 years in this tree, he said calmly. I see, Bluejam said as he greedily took the map and looked over it with that same hungry glint in his eyes. Luffy sniffled again as he watched all the hard work that he and his brothers had done go to such a criminal. Don't cry, Ace said to him firmly, not letting him see how hard it was for him too. It's alright, this is not the end. He's something else, Brook said in awe. With everything happening, the fire, and now Bluejam, he's taking all this well. Funny how it takes your life being in danger for you to see your priorities, Robin said smiling knowingly, remembering how she had come to the realization that she wanted to live. Just when it looked like the boys were going to be okay, Bluejam passed the map to one of his men, while 2 more grabbed Luffy and Ace from behind. Hey, Chopper yelled, what's he doing? What's it look like? Nami demanded. Twice Ace took a pirate by his word, and twice he was betrayed. But they told them. Usopp yelled out. Like Nami, they know that there was always a chance that they could have been lying, Robin said. What are you doing? Ace demanded as he fought and lashed out. I told you where it is. Bluejam chuckled to himself, you're right, this isn't the end. Which means you could be lying. You have to come with me. But then there'd be no way for them to escape. Frankie called out in alarm. Nami stared around at the flames. The wind's picking up again. She screamed. They have to leave this place now or it'll be too late. No way. Then it would be too late to escape. Ace screamed out, now losing his cool and struggling harder than ever, why don't you go on your own? Come on. Brook called earnestly, you have no more reason to hurt them. Just let them go. However, Bluejam lost all facade and pointed his gun at Ace's head to get him to stop. He looked angrier than ever, which only served to make him look more twisted than before. You don't want to mess with me now. He yelled out threateningly, I'm determined to make a comeback even if it means stealing from kids so I can take revenge on the nobles. And your brother is one of them. Revenge? Brook repeated questionably. On the nobles. Usopp finished for him, before his eyes widened in understanding. I can't say that I'm surprised, Robin said, having already guessed this when she first saw the pirates coming through the flames. So you mean? Chopper said slowly. The nobles betrayed them, Robin nodded, I should have figured that was what happened. They're the ones who were behind the fire, and they left them here to die with the rest of the trash. But they were following their orders, Chopper said horrified, even so, they locked them in here. It all makes sense, Robin confirmed, the nobles wanted the Grey Terminal taken care of so they hired him to destroy it. They must have promised him a lot of money in return, perhaps even something like a full pardon for their crimes as pirates. But they never intended to keep their promise, Zoro nodded in understanding, I get it. Can't say that they don't deserve it, but that's low even for the nobles here. I'm not broken up about it, Usopp said, as the rest of the crew nodded. They deserve everything they got for all they did. But again, why? Nami demanded. That doesn't matter now, Sanji said as Luffy was glaring fiercely at Bluejam for what he said about Sabo. Bluejam didn't bother look at him as he clicked his gun back, still pointing the barrel at Ace. They think they're so special and look down on others as if we're trash. Actually, that's true, Robin said, having seen that countless times in the past. But at the same time, Sabo isn't like that, Ace yelled defiantly. Yeah, Chopper yelled out, his hooves in the air. Don't you dare say anything bad about him. He's the same as them, fool. Bluejam screamed at him, his eyes now almost popping out, he was with you both just to feel superior. That's not true, Luffy screamed at him, refusing to listen to what he was saying. His parents are loaded, he doesn't have to worry about anything, Bluejam yelled at him. It was just a pastime to him. He was looking down on you guys and laughing to himself holding his nose. Just because his parents were like that, doesn't mean that he was. Brook called as Frankie cracked his metal hands together to calm himself down. Don't drag Sabo into this. Stop talking badly about Sabo. Ace threatened wildly, his temper quickly growing out of his control again. Yeah, Sabo just wants to be free. Luffy yelled out before he finally escaped the pirate's grip by biting down on his arm, causing him to scream in pain. Luffy jumped down and turned to face him, his staff held high, ready to attack. Pulling out and raising his sword high, the pirate screamed out, you little shit. Duck Luffy. Usopp screamed, but too late. As Luffy tried to block it, the sword cut right through the pipe and leaving a deep gash that stretched across half his face. Luffy. Both Nami and Ace screamed in terror. Oh no. Chopper screamed out as Luffy screamed in agony and fell to the ground, rolling around as he gripped his hands over the bleeding wound. He almost lost an eye there. He needs a doctor. But the pirate then raised his sword directly above him, the point held down as he declared, I'm going to kill you. Don't you touch him. Usopp and Brook screamed out. Let go of me. Ace yelled in a panic as the pirates laughed when the sword thrust down, Luffy's uninjured eye widening in terror through his fingers. Luffy. The Straw Hats screamed out, for one heart-stopping moment, thinking that it was all over. Intel. Don't touch Luffy. Ace screamed out so loudly that he might have torn his throat. But at those words, without warning, they felt it. Even though it was a memory, they could feel the shockwave coming from Ace. For a moment everything froze. The fire around them died down, the men stood there with stunned looks on their faces, and that was when they fell. All pirates, save for Blue Jam, fell where they stood, each one out cold before they even hit the ground. Ace jumped down from man who held him as the sword narrowly missed Luffy's face, and instead sinking into the ground next to his head. As soon as the sword missed its target, time seemed to start up again and the fire was back in full force. The Straw Hats all stood there, staring in shock at Ace, who had flung to his little brother's side. Luffy, are you okay? That was, Sanji croaked out, his eyes widening. Conqueror's Haki, Zoro finished for him. Unbelievable, Ace is only 10. I mean, it took a war for Luffy to learn how to use it. It's not that surprising, considering how strong Ace was, Robin said, though she too looked amazed. But why isn't Luffy asking him how he did that? Chopper croaked out, and why isn't Ace wondering how? I doubt they even notice, Robin said, as Ace put his hands over Luffy's and moved them away so that he could see the deep gash that was bleeding everywhere. Considering all this, Ace probably didn't even realize what he'd done. How could he not notice that? Nami demanded. That's some major, super, power. Frankie added. When his brother was in danger, he subconsciously used it, Robin answered them. In his desire to save Luffy, he tapped into power he never even knew he had. He didn't think about, he almost, willed, it to happen. She stepped forward to see Ace closer, whether or not he could use it from this point on is a question I don't know. But still, Brook called, while Blue Jam stared at his men in horror, not understanding what just happened. So amazing, such power at such a young age. This power is sometimes awakened through time of great stress and desperation, Robin said. Haki responds to desperation by growing even stronger. You don't get more stressed out than this. Usopp called as Chopper nodded firmly by his side. Luffy was still crying as blood seeped through his fingers and Ace looked over him. But as his full attention was on Luffy, Blue Jam grabbed him by the back of his shirt and pulled him away. What did you do? Blue Jam bellowed as he slammed him into the ground. Ace slowly tried to get up. Damn it, he cursed when Blue Jam stomped down hard on Ace's chest so that he couldn't move and the gun was being pointed at his head again. You creepy little brat. Blue Jam yelled, now almost foaming at the mouth, and they knew that whatever sanity that had been there finally snapped. Do you want to make a fool out of me too? Well, if it happens enough times it can't be that hard. Sanji challenged. Why not pick on someone your own size? Shut up, you scumbag. Ace yelled at him without a trace of fear. You bastard. Blue Jam yelled with his finger on the trigger. Luffy had rolled over onto his stomach and looked up. Ace. He screamed, even worse than when Sabo was taken away. Don't do it, he begged Blue Jam. Nami had a violent flashback of her mother being killed by Arlong, and her eyes widened in terror. This couldn't end like this. Chopper covered his eyes just as the gun was fired. As he heard it go off, he had horrific memories of being shot at by the villagers of his home island and felt the need to be sick. But as he cautiously opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was that the rest of his crew was staring there with their jaws open wide at the scene before them, each one of them with identical expressions of shock on their faces. Chopper fearfully looked back to Ace, almost expecting to see Ace lying there bleeding with a bullet hole in his head. The gun was still smoking, but the bullet had missed Ace's face much like how the sword had narrowly missed Luffy before. Instead, there was a small hole in the ground next to him that was also smoldering. The only reason that it missed was because a familiar figure had grabbed hold of the gun barrel and forced it away at the last second. Dayton. Chopper and Luffy called at the same time. Dayton's eyes were narrowed dangerous as she held up her long axe, her thick orange hair swishing around like the blaze around her. Stop it, you sea cretin. She took a swing at him, finishing by calling out, let go of Ace. I can't believe she showed up. Nami exclaimed in shock. Dayton swung and Blue Jam held his sword up, blocking it, thus saving his life but forcing him away from the boys. Look there, Brook called, pointing behind them, and they could see a large group of people fighting their way through the fire. When they were close enough, they recognized who they were. The mountain bandits. Usopp cried startled. What are they doing here? Don't know, but I'm not complaining. Frankie cried, finally grinning again. They came here to save them. The little man named Dogro was the first one to Luffy, and helped him to sit up as he looked over his injury. Luffy looked terrible, the bleeding wound was now covering half his face with blood, and Luffy kept his right eye tightly shut. "What are you guys doing here?" Luffy asked him, wincing in pain. "Finally, we found you." Mogra called in relief. How could they find them in all this is a miracle itself. Nami said loudly. "These are pretty serious wounds, Luffy," Dagra said worriedly, looking over him. "Are you okay?" Luffy looked towards the bandit. "Dagra," he croaked out. Dagra was now glancing around quickly. "I don't see Sabo anywhere." "Sabo went home," Luffy explained quickly. "He's not here." As Dagra sighed in relief, he called for one of the bigger bandits to come over and carry Luffy. "I don't know where they've been all this time," Robin smiled, "but it's a good thing that they came when they did. Another few seconds and Ace would be dead." "Robin, why must you scare us?" Usopp begged. "Looks like they do care after all, yo ho ho," Brook said happily as Ace turned to face Blue Jam, Mogra now trying to hold him back. Blue Jam however glared over them all with frustration. "You're the boss monkey from Mount Corvo?" he asked her. Dayton looked up at him and stood tall. "I'm the mountain bandit, Dayton," she corrected proudly, like she couldn't imagine any other life she'd rather be living. "I don't know why, but I'm registered as their foster parent." She then looked back at Luffy and Ace who were now being protected on all sides by the other bandits. "When someone tries to take my boy's life, I won't stand by and watch." She sighed before she pointed her axe at Blue Jam and proclaimed, "Even if I am not their real parent." The Straw Hats couldn't stop staring at her. Just a few months before this event, she couldn't seem to have cared less about the boys, but here she was now risking her life for them. "When did that change?" Zoro asked. "Well, they are cute," Robin smiled. "It's hard not to love something so sweet." "That or she's scared that Garp might kill her for letting them get killed," Zoro muttered. "Must you ruin such a touching scene?" Brook yelled at him. "They're here risking their lives for them. Of course they care. It was so touching that it touched my heart. Not that I have one but still." "I agree," Nami smiled, filled with new respect for Dayton. Even if she has a strange way of showing it, she does care about them. She shut her eyes for a brief moment, thinking of her mother's smiling face. "Just because you're not related to someone doesn't make you any less than family. I'll just let you go if you back away," Dayton said firmly, holding up her axe. "If you don't, then I'll have to resort to violence." "Yeah, 'cause now he's the one outnumbered." Usopp grinned. "He's not the problem anymore." Nami yelled as the fire grew hotter around them. Blue Jam didn't react at all as he glared at her, slowly grinning as he held up his sword. "Try it," he threatened her. "All right," Frankie called, grinning from ear to ear. "Show him, Dayton." Dayton stepped forward, looking ready for that fight as she held her weapon in one hand. "Oh yeah," she said as she glared at Blue Jam. "All right then." Chopper and Usopp both stood there, smiling eagerly, ready for Blue Jam to get what he deserved. "Run!" Dayton screamed out and just then she turned and ran with the other bandits. Usopp and Chopper both fell forward and did face plants on the ground. "What the hell?" Usopp screamed, popping back up. "I thought she was gonna fight him." Chopper yelled out. "It was obviously a bluff, you two," Sanji said. Most of the rest of the Straw Hats had sweat dropped at the sight of seeing them run. "But then again, I think it'd be better to just leave. They wasted enough time with this loser anyway." But then he noticed that there was someone who stayed where he was. "Hey, what are you doing?" Dagra yelled back. Ace had stood there, not making any attempt to run as he still stood there facing Blue Jam, Mogra there, pleading for him to run as he pulled desperately on his arm. But Ace pulled himself free as he stepped forward. "What's he thinking?" Nami cried. Zoro's eye narrowed. "He's not leaving." And just like that Ace held the pipe up, still glaring firmly at the pirate. Ace said without a trace of hesitation or fear, "won't run." "Not again," Usopp cried, freaking out. "He's doing it again." Sabo was right. Ace has a death wish. What's he think he's doing? Nami screamed out. "They're home free. Just turn and run. The fire has almost blocked everything off. Even if he does stay and fight him, he'll be killed one way or another." But Zoro kept his eyes on Ace's. He could see what this was about. He could see that fierce determination in his eyes and why he wasn't going to run. "Please run, Ace-san," Brook called with Chopper crying as he climbed up onto Brook's shoulder, crying in fear. "What are you saying, Ace?" Dagra yelled, voicing what they were feeling. "Don't try to fight him. Blue Jam is a real villain. He's not a guy that a kid like you can beat." But Ace wasn't the only one who wanted to fight. Seeing his brother there had given Luffy his second win, he was now struggling to get out of the bandits' arms and get back to Ace. Let me fight too." "No," Chopper yelled out, "he's really hurt. He needs medical attention now." "No, Luffy," the bandit yelled, grabbing him in a bear hug to keep him from running back. "Someone grab Ace," Sanji called, but Dayton was now slowly walking back as well, her axe over her shoulder. She turned back to the rest of them and said, "You all, why don't you take Luffy and go on ahead?" "The boss," one of the bandits gasped. "She's," Nami whispered. "I'll take responsibility for bringing Ace home," Dayton said firmly, also with a hint of annoyance, clear that she wasn't happy about this, but her mind was made up. "She's staying to help Ace." Frankie said, "Yow." What a woman. I'm sorry I called her ugly before. Boss, the bandits muttered, each one of them was looking upset and sick at the thought of leaving her. Go. Dayton ordered fiercely, much like how a pirate captain would give an order to their crew. Yes, ma'am, they yelled as they turned and ran. Luffy was flung over the bandit's shoulders as he screamed out his brother's name. Ace, he called out, still trying to fight to get back to him, but was weak from blood loss. Having no other choice, the Straw Hats all went chasing after him, but as they ran, they couldn't stop themselves from looking back as well, watching the two forms of Ace and Dayton disappear in the blaze. Ace, Luffy cried, tears now falling with the blood, Ace. But the bandits had a tight hold of him as they kept running across the hellish landscape and into the safety of the middle forest. But they didn't stop, they kept going anyway until they were as far away from the Great Terminal as they could get, stopping only when they climbed a large hill. They couldn't see the terminal thanks to the trees, but the sky was bright red and the black smoke lifted into the air. They all stood there, each one of them crying out for Dayton and Ace, hoping for a miracle. Luffy cried loudest of them all, his eyes wide in horror as he watched the fire continue to spread and the roar of the flames burning the wind itself. He bellowed out at the top of his lungs, as if hoping that his brother could hear him and find his way back. The darkness was back and the memory finally faded, and not a moment too soon. Each one of the Straw Hats was staring in front of them, unable to believe what they had just seen. Usopp was shaking from head to foot. I can't believe it, he whispered, how the hell could Luffy stand all this? First Sabo was taken away, and now all this. This happened years ago, Robin whispered, to survive, you have to be strong enough to keep going forward. Luffy is stronger in more ways than one. I'd say that it's more like he's driven to keep going, Sanji told her, his hand shaking a little as he finally pulled out another cigarette and lit it. Yes, Robin said, but he's strong to do so. She thought of all that fire, suddenly thinking of how Ohara looked after the Buster call. She shivered, and wrapped her arms around her as if cold. Even after all these years, she was still haunted by that horrific day, the image of her home being destroyed in much the same way as the Great Terminal was. She kept her lips firmly together, fighting hard against the wave of grief that welled up inside her, almost escaping. I just don't see how it could possibly get worse from here, Usopp croaked as he sank to the ground, suddenly exhausted. I mean, what else could happen? Almost afraid to find out, Sanji said. But hell, Ace was something else, wasn't he? He was a bigger handful than Luffy was, Zoro sighed, still thinking about that fierce determination in Ace's eyes. The darkness faded for the next scene and the first thing they saw was the inside of the mountain bandit's hut. Luffy was there, practically crawling along the side of the wall, making his way slowly to the door. He looked exhausted as he hung on, bandages covered his arms that were mending his burns along with the half of his face where the pirate attacked him. He seemed barely able to stand on his own, breathing almost painfully. But still, he was heading to the door, with every intention to go out and find Ace and Dayton. What's he thinking? Chopper cried out, looking close to panicking again. He's in bad shape, he should be in bed. But there was only one thing on Luffy's mind. Ace, Luffy said to himself stubbornly, finally making it to the door. Just then, Mogra came in, and spotted him out of bed. Oi, Luffy, he called, but Luffy ignored him as he leaned against the wall, struggling for breath. Though he had only moved a few feet from his bed, the effort was quickly taking its toll. Well, at least they treated him this time, Sanji said grimly. Easy, easy. Wait, Luffy, Mogra said as he headed over to him. The rest of the bandits had come from the back as well to see what was going on. You haven't recovered, where are you going? Where does he think? Usopp asked, aren't they worried at all about Ace or their boss? I gotta go look for Ace and Dayton, Luffy said, though weak, his voice was still strong. Taking a deep breath, he ran to the door. You can't do that, Mogra called just as he threw the door open with such force that he fell through it and hit the ground. Ouch, he whimpered softly, curling into a ball where he lay and didn't move again. Is he okay? Nami cried out as Chopper quickly ran over and looked him over. It doesn't appear to be anything life-threatening, he said, looking up at them. He's just exhausted mostly, and he did lose a lot of blood from last night. Mogra's right, he shouldn't be moving. Even with Luffy's fast healing, he should still be in bed. Speaking of Mogra, he ran up almost as soon as Luffy hit the ground. See, that's what I told you, he said, carefully picking him back up and carrying him back to the bed. The rest of the bandits sat there watching as Luffy was tucked in, and tended to with a box of medical supplies next to his head. But why don't they go look for them? Chopper called out. Don't they care at all? Why don't you look at their faces? Robin asked softly. Blinking in confusion, Chopper did, and he could see at once all the scared and worried looks, each one of them glancing at the door, as if hoping that they would come back and everything would be like it was. What else could be happening? Sanji demanded. What's going on that they can't leave and look for them? What I don't get is why the bandits are suddenly caring so much, Zoro said, looking over them all. After all, it's been months since they left this place, but they came out to look for them in that fire and are taking care of him now, not to mention Dayton staying behind with Ace. Like Brooke said before, Robin told him, you can't spend so much time with someone and not worry about them. She glanced up at the bandits again and added, though they act like they don't care, they still spent a lot of time with the boys. And when they saw the fire starting, I'm sure that they were worried about them. Mogra sighed as he leaned back. You're seriously wounded, he informed him. You have to rest nice and easy. Chopper nodded, glad that Mogra was taking charge of this. While he didn't seem like a doctor, he did seem to know a thing or two about medicine. How can anyone sleep after what happened last night? Frankie asked bitterly, thinking of all those people who must have died last night. As if he heard what he was thinking, Dogra spoke up, trying to reason Luffy into staying and resting. There are a lot troops in Great Terminal now taking care of the mess from the fire. And it's not just burnt junk they're taking care of, but survivors too. You're going to get killed if you go there. Wait, what? Usopp screamed out. You mean there? Why am I not surprised? Zoro demanded. We should have guessed that they do something like this. After all, wasn't them who planned the fire in the first place? Killing the survivors. Chopper whispered as the rest just looked on, horror-struck by those words. The way that Dogra said it, like it was something that happened every week. But Chopper couldn't take it. He was a doctor, for crying out loud. Those people who did survive the fire might have been saved if they were taken to a hospital and given emergency treatment. But instead, they were probably being killed even as they talked about it. He couldn't take it as he cried out at the idea. He could only imagine how those people might have felt. To survive such a devastating fire, probably lying there burnt and pleading for help. To see people coming towards them, probably thinking that they were here to help, only for them to. Damn them, Nami whispered, biting her lip at how sick and twisted this was. This place. Those nobles are worse than anyone in the Great Terminal. She was actually shaking at the thought, her fingernails digging into her palms. They're worse than anything rotten in all that trash. They're rotten to the core. To actually plan all this. It's one thing to want to get rid of the garbage, but the people too. To them, the people who lived there were no better than garbage, Zoro said darkly, his head lowered sadly. But you're right, there's nothing but empty, soulless bastards. To treat life in such a way, Brook whispered, his hand on his cane, shaking violently so that his bones knocked together. It makes me sick to my stomach. He was so angry, he didn't bother to try and make a joke about it. But, Luffy began with a whimper, unable to accept the truth. Tears were forming in his eyes, and he didn't even bother to hide them as he sobbed openly, screaming out, I wanna see Ace. At those words, Nami looked away, feeling tears in her own eyes. She knew that Ace must have made it out of this mess alive, but she still couldn't stop them from coming. Frankie, Brooke, Usopp and Chopper all felt the same way as they began to cry as well. Not even the bandits could be completely emotionless after hearing that and looked away, all of them with pained expressions. I know Sabo's worried about us, too. Luffy added as he cried loud and hard. I don't want to see any more, Nami whispered, her hands covering her face. I wanna go back to the sunny. We all do, Robin said, tears also pricking at her eyes as she put her hand gently on Nami's shoulder. But at the same time, it's like we can't bring ourselves to stop watching. The memory faded out again. I know, but I still can't stand to see any more, Nami said, rubbing her eyes. This is all private anyway. She looked to them all, desperate for some kind of door to open and they could leave. There has to be a way out of here. I'm on it, Nami Swan. Sanji declared, and without another word, he went running off into the darkness. Sanji. Usopp and Chopper cried after him as his footsteps disappeared into the void. Does that idiot even know where he's going? Zoro asked before he heard the sounds of running behind them and looked back at once. But he stared at what he saw. It was Sanji, running back towards them. As soon as he saw them all, he skidded to a stop and stared at them. What the hell? He cried out, looking behind him. But wow, Sanji, Chopper cried out. How'd you do that? I didn't do anything, Sanji said, looking back at them with wide eyes. I just went running off to look for a door and I'm running back here. What? Frankie cried, and then he went running off in a random direction. Not you too, Frankie. Nami cried out behind him, but almost as soon as the sounds of his clanking footsteps faded in front of them, they heard it behind them and they spun around to see Frankie running towards them out of the dark. Ehhhhhh. Usopp screamed out, what's with this place? How do you run away from something only to end up back where you started from? I suppose you could if you walked around the world, Robin said softly. I guess it's a small world after all, Zoro said, though even he sounded concerned. Unless, Robin added softly, her eyes widening. Wait, I think I might know. We've experienced this before, remember? Huh, they all asked looking at her. Yes, she declared, if I'm right then. But what she was about to say next was swallowed up as the memory came back again. This time, it looked to be the late afternoon as they stood in the middle of the bandits' hut. They looked around at all the bandits who were all sitting there sulking in depression around the room, each one of them with bleak looks on their faces. But the Straw Hats were all quickly looking around for one person only. They finally spotted Luffy, and from the looks of things, it had been at least a full day since the last memory. His wounds looked mostly healed, most of his bandages were removed, and he was now curled up in a small ball against the door. I'm guessing that Ace-san still hasn't come back yet, Brooke asked softly. And neither has Dayton, Nami added, now looking deeply concerned. You don't think they've been hurt, do you? Chopper asked softly, now cursing himself for not being able to help. I doubt they were able to get away unscathed, Sanji told him. But then, the door burst open and one of the bandits came running inside, gasping for breath. Hey guys, he cried out, standing in the doorway as everyone looked up at him. What is it? Magra asked, getting up and going to him earnestly. The man then looked up, tears of relief in his eyes and a smile on his face that could only mean one thing. They're returned, he cried out. Relief flooded through each of them as Luffy looked up at once, jumping up and running to the door. The only problem was that as soon as they heard that, they all made a beeline for the door as well. After much struggling, pushing, and shoving, it had been Luffy and Magra who got out first. The Straw Hats on the other hand, simply had to walk through the wall as if they were ghosts. That never fails to freak me out, Usopp said, shivering. It's like we've all become ghosts, and what the hell? He stopped dead at what he saw, they all did. Ace was slowly approaching the house, covered in burns, ash, and mostly destroyed clothes. He was missing a shoe as he continued to walk closer, gasping under Dayton's weight, who he was carrying on his back. Dayton looked, if possible, even worse. She was covered in bandages, her hair singed and coughing, she seemed barely aware of what was going on around her. But still, both of them were alive. This is bad, Chopper cried out, looking over their conditions. No kidding, Sanji muttered, a little green in the face, they look half dead on their feet. The bandits however were all cheering, all of them so happy that they finally came back. Ace, boss, Magra croaked out, tears of joy in his eyes as they ran forward to help. Those wounds look terrible, hurry, tend to the boss's wounds. One of the bandits yelled as they helped her off Ace's back, and led her back to the hut. Ace, still struggling for air, followed after them. As for Luffy, he was just standing there, looking too stunned to speak. He stood there in a kinda daze as they were taken inside, and it wasn't until Dayton was being treated did he come back to reality. Is he okay? Usopp asked, looking at Luffy, who never stopped staring at Ace as if he was afraid that he'd disappear. He'll be just fine, Robin smiled. Luffy's just happy that Ace came back. Watch. And as if she had said the magic word, Luffy charged Ace from behind, crying out his name and hugging him so tightly they almost wondered if he intended to ever let go. Ace, who was changing shirts, looked down at him. Luffy, he said in a tone they knew all too well, showing that he was annoyed. Did you think I was dead? He didn't want to, Brooke said, he was just worried. I see how this is gonna end, Zoro said, shaking his head, though there was a shadow of a smile on his face. Luffy let go and croaked out, still crying hard, but... What are you crying for? Ace demanded, suddenly angry as he gave Luffy a hard punch to the head. Don't act like I'm dead when I'm not, you idiot. Nami sighed as Luffy cried even harder, rubbing his head where it was starting to swell already. Not even 5 minutes and he's already hitting him. What more does he want? They're both back and alive, aren't they? Why is he trying to pick a fight? You know it was his fault for refusing to run. I still think they should have knocked him out and made a run for it while they had the chance. It's nothing to worry about, Robin smiled. It just proves that things are back to normal. I suppose that we should just count our blessings that they're dealing well, considered everything that happened. And I'm guessing that Ace still doesn't know how to react to someone caring about him, Sanji said, remembering how he had tried to pick a fight with Luffy after they rescued him from Porchimi. Now, let him be, Magra scolded Ace lightly, a small smile on his own face. Luffy is just happy. He doesn't look like it to me, Chopper said, watching. Now, Sanji said, breathing out smoke. We all have our ways of showing how we care. He then turned to Nami and Robin and cried out, hearts flashing in his eyes, my loves. I hope you always know how much I care for you both. I'll gladly go to the ends of the earth for both of you. No matter how hard or long the journey will be, I'll be there to protect you the whole way. Nami rolled her eyes as Robin smiled politely. Now that the danger was over and Ace and Dayton were back, everything seemed to be looking brighter. Ace glared at Magra for a second before he looked down at Luffy, as if wondering just what he was supposed to do now. Finally, he ruffled Luffy's hair in an awkward, but oddly tender way. At his touch, Luffy ran back to him and hugged him tightly, as he cried harder than ever. Ace was startled by this, but didn't say anything as Luffy clung on strongly. That's just too sweet, Robin said, once again, feeling jealous of the bonds that brothers had. Yeah, Usopp agreed, also smiling again. So sweet I think I'm getting a cavity just looking. I'm glad that things worked out. Once Luffy had calmed down enough to stop crying, and let go of Ace, Dayton was properly treated and they were all surrounding her bed. How bad is she, Chopper? Sanji asked, not liking to see any woman in pain. Chopper looked over them at the wounds that Magra was treating. She was seriously burned, he informed him. And from the look of it, she inhaled a lot of the smoke. But I think she has a good chance at pulling through without any long-lasting effects if she lets herself rest. Nami sighed in relief. That's good to hear. I was worried. Ace, about the night of the fire, one of the bandits said as they finished bandaging Dayton's hands up. After we took Luffy and left, what happened to you and the boss when you stayed behind? That's what I wanna know, Zoro said interestedly. Ace sighed, and explained the whole thing. After you left, we stayed and fought Blue Jam, he stated simply. And then he went on to explain how they were able to defeat him, but when they did, they were surrounded by fire. He told them all how it was Dayton who went running through the fire to get them out, how they hid in the middle forest near the river as Ace struggled to keep Dayton alive. He told them about how he had been forced to steal food and medicine from Hightown and was able to stabilize her, all the while, hiding from the soldiers who were still looking for survivors. What a brave woman, Frankie cried out. I take back everything I said about her. What a lady. Looks like she does have a kind side to her after all. Nami smiled, glad to see that she'd been wrong about her. Now, Magra said with that same kind look on his face, looking down at his boss, so that's what happened. Well, I'm glad that you both made it out alive. I think we all agree there, Usopp whispered, feeling much more lighthearted than he had been for such a long time. I'm sorry I made you worry, Dayton said softly. Did she just apologize? Zoro asked in surprise. Is it really that hard to imagine that she cares about the bandits? Brook asked, though it was hard to tell, the bandits were a family, much like how the Straw Hat Pirates were. Was it truly hard to believe that they did for one another? Ace looked ahead, lost in thought as he muttered to himself, I never thought that something like this could happen to the Great Terminal, I'm sure Sabo's worried. He must know by now about the fire, Sanji said, his own eyes narrowing. No one could have missed that. And he would be worried sick over wondering if his brother's being hurt or not. As Ace continued to talk with the others, Luffy decided to go outside with the white dog that acted as the mountain bandits' mascot, Pochi. Wow, Usopp said, looking up at the sky, I didn't realize just how much time had passed, it's almost night. Luffy looked up at the sky as well with a melancholy face and asked Pochi, I wonder what Sabo's up to. But he down looked at him with a small smile, still, I'm glad Ace came back and Dayton's getting better. Pochi barked in agreement as Brook said, I too am glad. It was all so frightening, I felt as if my heart would stop. Ah, not that I have a heart to stop. Yo-ho-ho-ho. Well, at least we know that Brook's feeling better, Sanji chuckled. As Luffy wandered around the hut, he found two large beetles, which caused Nami and Sanji to stand far back from. But Luffy's eyes began to glow at the sight of them and brought them both to a small barrel where he put them there, trying to get them to fight each other. Isn't that cute? Robin smiled. Boy, he's acting just like he did when we were at Jaya, Nami sighed, but even she was having a hard time not to beam. An Atlas and a Hercules beetle. Chopper proclaimed proud that he could recognize them. Luffy talked all about them when we were looking for that south bird. There's just something about little boys that just love playing with bugs, Nami sighed. Hey, be nice, Frankie said grinning. Alright, who's going to win? Luffy asked cheerfully, poking them both with a stick. I see that he's recovering from the fire quickly, Brook said happily. That's good to see. He's resilient, Sanji reminded him. He just bounces back no matter what happens. You think he'd be a little more upset to what happened though, Usopp said softly. Ace and Dayton came back, Zoro answered, watching the happy shine in the boy's eyes. That's enough for him for now. As Luffy continued to play around with the beetles, they heard rustling coming from the trees, and that was when Dogra came out from the forest. He was pale and shaking, obviously tired from his long search for Ace and Dayton. Luffy heard him, and when he spotted him coming, he got up and cried out, Dogra. Waving the stick around happily. You went looking for Ace and Dayton, right? They've both came home. Dogra looked a little relieved, but the nervous, pale look on his face didn't fade at that. Really? He stuttered, for some reason not really able to look at Luffy. They have. That's great. What's his problem? Frankie asked annoyed, you think he'd be happy to hear that they're alright. That's why he went out to look for him, right? Zoro narrowed his eye, watching Dogra smile a little too forcibly at Luffy, a little too cheerful. Something happened. Yes, and if he was out at the Grey Terminal, there's a chance that he saw the soldiers therein. Robin offered before she trailed off. But no one needed or wanted her to finish that line. Luffy, not noticing Dogra's behavior, led him inside the house, happily telling everyone else that Dogra had come home. It was a relief to see that Dayton was already sitting up, looking pale, but much better as Magra poured some sake for her. This is all the medicine I need, she told him firmly as she drank it down. When life gives you lemons, buy more sake if you ask me. Words to live by, Zoro smirked, now dying for a hard drink himself. Oh, Dogra, Magra said, smiling when his friend walked in, but it soon faded when he saw the shocked look on Dogra's face. What is it? He asked. Yeah, you look like you just saw a ghost, another bandit told him. Luffy finally noticed and asked, Dogra. Dogra didn't say a word as he stood there in front of them all. It was then that Zoro noticed that his hands were shaking, and his face was working hard as if trying to find the words to describe what happened. Dogra, Dayton said to him loudly, helping herself to another swig of drink, what is it? Dogra was shaking all over now, but he finally spoke, his hands curled into tight fists at his sides. I went into Hightown earlier. I heard that there was some kind of ceremony going on. I snuck in and I overheard some of the guards talking about it. He was gritting his teeth together, his eyes suddenly shadowed over so that they couldn't see the emotion in them. The king and the nobles were the ones behind the fire the other night. The nobles planned it all, they spread the rumor to Edgetown that it was Bluejam who had caused it. What kind of king would do this? Brooke demanded in outrage. Those lousy pieces of shit, Sanji growled. They really are all real monsters, Nami croaked out miserably. But they call us monsters, Chopper reminded her, suddenly fretfully. There are two kinds of monsters, Sanji said looking down at him. The strong and powerful kind, and the ones who do horrible things like this. We've all done a lot of, questionable things in the past that we aren't proud of, but we never hurt people like this. So the people in Edgetown didn't know anything about it? One of the bandits asked. They were in danger too last night, Dogra explained. If the fire was any higher, the wind could have blown the flames inside the wall. No, they were all as surprised by it as the rest of us. But why? Dayton asked the million-berry question. The nobles never bothered with the Great Terminal before, why go through all this now? What was so special about this stupid ceremony? Ace asked angrily. Dogra was now shaking, they were welcoming the celestial dragons at port. At that name, the Straw Hats' eyes all widened and the air seemed to catch in their chests. Suddenly it all made complete sense. They all understood everything now. The celestial dragons. Nami repeated, oddly numb. You mean the same ones that we saw at Sabayati? Chopper cried out, the ones that tried to take Kami from us. So that's it, Robin said softly, her eyes narrowing. The nobles wanted to impress them so they decided to get rid of everything undesirable in their kingdom. So rather than spend so much time and money cleaning up the mess they decided to burn it all as a cheap and quick escape. You mean they did all this for the world nobles? Nami cried out, they killed everyone in the Great Terminal just for something like this. Why those, Sanji growled. Just when I thought that they couldn't be any more rotten. This whole kingdom's rotten to the core. But why would they come here? Usopp demanded, why would they come all the way to a kingdom this far out in the East Blue? Why would they be here? Magra asked, thankfully asking Usopp's question. I don't know, Dogra went on with a shake of his head, apparently they were here to inspect the kingdom. Inspect? Dayton asked, thinking something over. Oh, right, she said, I remember reading about something or other about an inspection of Goa. Who are these guys anyway? Ace asked grumpily. What makes them so special? Nothing at all, Frankie shouted out, they just think they're special. Think of them as like nobles of the world government, one of the other bandits told him. You think the guys here in Goa are rich with a lot of influence? Well, they're nothing compared to the celestial dragons. They have influence everywhere in the world. Not just on this island. Dogra, Luffy asked innocently, not understanding what was going on. What's wrong? Dogra was shaking worse than ever. Seriously, what's with him? Frankie asked, folding his massive arms, you think that he saw someone die or something? I don't know how to say it, Dogra said, his voice now trembling. I was there at port watching the celestial dragon's ship coming in, but as they got near, a small fishing boat set out from out of nowhere. A fishing boat? Dayton repeated in surprise, what's that got to do with anything? The celestial dragon's ship fired on it and killed the person on board. It was a child, Dogra cried out, shaking his head hard, and he finally cried out, it was Sabo. It was him. The Straw Hats felt as if the world was closing in around them, making it hard to breathe. Each one of them felt as if they had just been punched in the gut as Dogra finally screamed out, Sabo's dead. No one spoke, they were all petrified by what they learned. This can't be, Brook whispered, now falling back, unable to believe what he just heard. Sabo, he's. Usopp could bring himself to say it, shaking from head to foot. Gone, Robin whispered, her eyes wide as she was forced to accept everything that happened. Chopper was crying as he thought about the boy that he had grown to like so much. Sure, he never met Sabo, but he had learned a lot about him through these memories, and he couldn't help but feel as if he lost a dear friend. Nami's hands were over her mouth as she stared at Luffy's and Ace's face. They looked as if they had just had their hearts ripped right out. Sanji actually fell to his knees. Damn them, damn those bastards to hell. Sabo is, Ace whispered in disbelief as he stared at Dogra, not believing it. Luffy and the bandits were each staring at Dogra with identical expressions of shock. They couldn't believe it either. You liar, Ace screamed out as he charged ahead. Ace's eyes suddenly burned with rage and he tacked Dogra to the floor. Don't even joke about that. He held his fist up, looking ready to strike until Magra called out, don't do it, Ace. He's just delivering the message, Zoro said enigmatically, there's no point in taking his anger out on him. He's not the one that should pay. It's not a lie, nor a joke, Dogra gasped out. It was so sudden, I barely realized that it had happened. I doubted my own eyes. I wondered if it was a dream or an illusion. A common response if it's so sudden, Robin whispered. These last few memories kept bringing back more and more of her own memories of Ohara, how it had all happened so quickly that she couldn't believe her own eyes. It was like she was in a living nightmare. Even now, she could almost swear that it had all been a bad dream. Shut up, Ace screamed out, now shaking Dogra, looking like he was going to seriously hurt Dogra if he kept talking. Sabo went back to his noble-born parents. There's no way he would sail out to sea. That's right, Sabo went home. Luffy yelled out in agreement, refusing to believe that Sabo was dead. They're in denial, Brook whispered. Of course, Robin told them, her hair hiding her own face, Sabo was alive and just fine a few days ago. They decided to leave him alone and wait for him to come back, but now he can't ever do that. And now the last memory they have of him is of him being taken back to the place that he was so desperate to escape from. On top of everything that happened in the last few days, it's too much for them to accept. Especially when they thought that they were safe. Outlaws like us understand how he must have felt. Dogra yelled, we all have places we really don't want to go back to. With a great effort, he was able to push Ace off him. Do you really think he would go out to sea if he were actually happy? He bawled him, finally looking up with tears now streaming down his face as he cried out, do you really think he would fly a pirate flag and set out on his own? Ace froze where he was, as if those words had struck him dumb. Like a curse, they fell over everyone in that room so that no one could move. The wind blowing through the window, ruffling the curtains was the only noise that they had as they all stood there as the rest of the world stopped. No one could do that on their own unless they were truly miserable, Zoro whispered. Why? Usopp whispered, tears now in his eyes. Why would he do that? What was he thinking doing something so stupid? Luffy stepped forward, almost staggering, his expression of shock now turned to pain. Sabo, he croaked out, tears forming in his eyes and now quickly falling from his face, he really wasn't happy. He screamed out. At his words, the bandits all bore similar expressions of grief and sorrow, but Ace was on his knees, twisting his hair around so violently that it looked like he was trying to pull it out. Why? He cried out, why didn't we try to break him out of there? When his eyes opened, Zoro saw at once that something snapped inside of him. He's going to do something stupid, he said. And knowing Ace, he was going to charge in head first. Filling up with a rage, Ace grabbed hold of Dogra again. Where is the person who killed Sabo? I'm gonna murder them. EHHHH. Usopp cried, his eyes now red and puffy. He's gonna kill himself. Remember what happened when Luffy attacked that one at the auction house? He stopped at that, suddenly realizing that when Luffy attacked that celestial dragon that day, there was much more to the story than he had ever thought. When he did punch that guy, was he thinking about Sabo at the time? Was it also possible that Luffy was taking revenge for when his brother was killed? The celestial dragon. There's no way you can do, Dogra cried out, but Ace was past listening. Going for his staff, he went running to door, screaming out that he was going to avenge Sabo's death. Someone stop him, Nami cried out, suddenly realizing how close Ace had come to getting killed. But this certainly proved to her once and for all that Ace truly was Luffy's older brother. They were both fearless and protective of those they loved. The fact that they both were willing to attack a celestial dragon and risk the idea of an admiral was enough. Though now that she thought of it, Ace probably had no idea how dangerous it was to go after the world nobles. Thankfully, her plea was answered. Dayton was on her feet again, and tackled Ace, slamming his head into the floor so hard that it was smashed into pieces. But she didn't have to do it like that, she added, wincing in pain. Drop it, you damn brat. Dayton yelled out as Ace fought to get up. Get off me, Ace shouted out as he swung around to glare at her. Don't get in my way. He cried out at the blood that was falling from a gash from one of the boards. Luffy and the others only stood there, staring in alarm at what was happening, unsure as to what to say or do. But Dayton had only gotten started. You keep acting tough, even though you don't have any real strength. She shrieked out, shoving his head down even deeper into the floor. What the hell do you think you can do now? She demanded. You'll just end up dead. You will die and everyone will forget about you by tomorrow. That's all you amount to right now. She took several deep breaths as she glared at him, his eyes wide with desperation. It was this kingdom that killed Sabo. It was the world itself. What can you do? Nothing, Frankie whispered, thinking of how helpless Tom was been taken away. That's what he hates. The idea that he can't do anything to avenge his own brother's death is more than he can stand. But you know that's not completely true, Robin said softly, her eyes going to the still crying Luffy. There's one person who'll always remember him. Your father's death brought about a new era. Dayton yelled, holding him up and shaking him hard. Once you have become a man of that caliber, then you're free to live or die as you like. Ace was still struggling, fighting to get free. And they could see that he knew that Dayton spoke the truth, but to admit to it would be like admitting that he couldn't do anything. I can't imagine how hard it would be for Ace-san to accept that, Brook whispered. But it's true, Sanji responded bitterly, after all, weaklings can't protect anything. You don't get to pick how you want to die. Seeing that he wasn't going to calm down anytime soon, Dayton yelled to the other bandits as she threw Ace at them, go tie this moron up. Shaken, the bandits handled Ace, carrying him outside to the nearest tree to tie him up. The whole time he fought back, cursing at them all, but too tired from his ordeal to do much. The whole time, Luffy was there crying, tears quickly forming a flood as he screamed out his lost brother's name. Ace screaming outside at Luffy to shut up, at how men weren't supposed to cry. But no matter how much he yelled, Luffy kept crying, and the cries of pain and loss filled their ears as the darkness came back. Nami had been unable to hold back her own tears as she thought about how that little boy had been so brutally killed for no good reason. So that's why we never heard about him, Zoro said quietly, feeling oddly numb from the whole thing. Don't you realize what this means? Usopp cried out, running his nose along his arm. Luffy lost both of his brothers. First Sabo, and then what happened to Ace? Poor Luffy, Chopper whispered as he bawled too. It's not fair. How could this happen? The government is never fair, Frankie hissed out, blowing his nose as he fought the urge to break something big and heavy. They don't care how many innocent lives they kill so long as they get what they want. This is what the government really is like. They go on and on about how they uphold justice while they're the ones behind all the suffering in the world. What makes those nobles so damn special? But why would they kill him? Nami cried, going to Robin to bury her face in her friend's shoulder. Sabo didn't do anything. Most likely the celestial dragons were offended by him ruining their entrance and decided to take care of him, Robin whispered. Tears were also falling from Brook's empty sockets as he and Zoro kept their heads down, silently paying their respects to Luffy and Ace's brother. Man, and I thought that Ace dying was bad enough, Usopp said, sniffling, but then there was all this mess with Sabo. How was Luffy able to deal all this on his own? He wasn't alone, Robin whispered to him. Usopp looked up at her to see her empty eyes. She looked as if her thoughts were a million miles away right now. It was different with Sabo than it was with Ace, she told him. Luffy never saw Sabo die. He only ever heard about it. And even then, he still had Ace there to help him through it. But Ace died right in front of him and, in a way, he was all alone after that. She glanced at them all and knew they were all wondering the same thing. Just what happened in that war zone. None of them knew the whole story to how Ace died, or exactly what Luffy had to go through that day, but they all noticed it. Though Luffy had grown 100 times stronger than ever before, and he still went on through life with a bright smile and simple attitude, but he wasn't the same person as he was before they were separated by Kuma. It was almost as if he was carrying around a heavy burden on his shoulders, as if he was struggling underneath a great weight. The darkness disappeared, and now they were all standing out on the cliff that overlooked the sea. They knew where they were at once. It was the same place where the three brothers had once talked about their dreams, shortly toasting their brotherhood. That memory seemed like a lifetime ago. For a moment, they didn't see Luffy, but soon spotted him lying on his stomach on the soft grass, but his hat was covering his face as he gazed out at the sea. Luffy, Usopp said softly as he carefully approached him, wanting to comfort him, but instead, his hand went right through. He never felt more useless in his life. How could he be sitting here watching this while his captain was suffering? Even if it was years ago, he felt sick with himself for not being able to do more here. Ace-san, Brook said softly, and they glanced up in time to see Ace walking towards them. His face was grim and cold, yet much calmer than he had been before. His burns from the fire seemed to have healed, as well as the cut on his forehead, meaning that it had to have been a couple days since they got the miserable news about Sabo. He didn't seem surprised at all to see Luffy there as he slowly approached, not saying a word but making enough noise that Luffy could hear him. When he was close enough, he made a fist and blew on it before he gave Luffy a quick bonk on the head. How long are you gonna mop around like this? He demanded. Was that really necessary, Ace? Usopp asked him sadly. Yes, we all need our time to grieve, Brook whispered softly. But Luffy didn't complain. He merely gripped the rim of his hat tightly, refusing to look at anything. Ace stood there for a minute, just gazing out at the sea before he began to speak. What he said next was in an indifferent tone, as if he couldn't care less about it. All the treasure we hid in the Middle Forest is gone now. He shrugged grimly as he folded his arms. Maybe it was stolen by the survivors of Blue Jam's crew, or maybe the military found it. I don't know where it is now. That doesn't matter anymore anyway, Nami said softly, her mother's smiling face coming to mind once again. Even with all the treasure in the world, you can't bring back someone you love. Apparently Ace agreed. But that pile of loot doesn't matter anymore, he said to Luffy. Sabo and I were gonna use it. It was our pirate fund. But in the end, Sabo didn't use it. So I'm not gonna bother with it either. Not much point in gathering treasure if we can't look after it. He's handling it all well, Brook said kindly. On the outside, Robin said sadly, but I think on the inside he's still in a lot of pain. After all, Sabo was his best friend before he became his brother. Ace? Luffy asked, his voice thick with emotion. I want to become stronger. He sniffed, and they could tell that he was fighting tears, stronger and stronger, stronger and stronger, stronger and stronger. This went on for some time as Luffy continued to repeat the word, stronger, putting much emphasis on how strong he wanted to be. Even while stating this with much vigor, he was still crying. Stronger and even stronger than that. And then, I'll be able to protect anything. I won't have to lose anyone ever again. The Straw Hats all kept their eyes firmly on the little boy. They all knew full well that he would, indeed, become stronger than anyone could imagine. Now here, it all made complete sense. So that's why he's so protective of us, Nami whispered. I get it, Frankie hissed, his robotic hands curling up in tight fists. It was never just about becoming Pirate King. He can understand the pain of losing someone, Brook whispered, he went through it and he never wanted to go through it again. Zoro didn't say anything, but he now felt like he understood Luffy so much better than ever before. He knew that same feeling after all. After Kunia died, he too wanted to become stronger than she ever was. Strong enough so that his name could reach up to the heavens where she could hear him. Letting her know that he carried on her dream and that he hadn't forgotten her. Luffy had been doing that exact same thing all this time, he was carrying on his brother's will. But he felt sick with himself for finding out this way. If Luffy had ever wanted to talk about his past, he would have mentioned it. Watching all this suddenly felt like a betrayal of the deepest degree and he was having trouble breathing. Please, Luffy suddenly begged out. Ace, don't die too. They all caught their breath. Luffy, Nami cried in hardly more of a whisper. Don't be ridiculous, Ace yelled, punching him in the head again. You should be more worried about yourself than me. You're way weaker than I am. He stood up straight and declared, listen up, and remember this, Luffy. I won't die. Too bad that he couldn't hold that promise, Sanji muttered bleakly. No one can forever, Zoro said quietly. He was promising that he wouldn't leave Luffy alone. Robin whispered as Chopper burst out in tears at that he would always be there for him when he needed him. Oh, man, Frankie called, covering his face with the hanky. I'm all torn up inside. I knew that they were close, but I never knew how much. Luffy slowly sat up as Ace went on, Sabo made that request too. I promise, I will not die. There's no way I'd die and leave behind a weakling of a brother like you. Well, that's mean, Usopp cried out. Ace still isn't good with being gentle, Robin said softly. He's dealing with it as best as he can. I'm not that smart, Ace went on, still staring out at the bright blue sea. So I don't know what it was that killed Sabo, but whatever it was the opposite of freedom. Sabo died without ever gaining his freedom. But what's the opposite of freedom? Chopper asked. The world, Robin answered grimly. It's always been the world. But the two of us, who shared a toast with Sabo, were still alive. Ace finished. He never once took his eyes off the sea, and his resolve appeared in his eyes. A light breeze picked up and he breathed it in, as if Sabo was there telling them this. So, listen up, Luffy. We will definitely live life without regrets. So that's it, Sanji said, breathing hard on the cigarette. That's why Luffy can act selfish when he wants to. The last thing he wants is to leave this world with regret. He wants to live to the fullest. Ace looked down at Luffy and told him, Sabo once said to me that in this country, noblemen only become true nobles when they turn 18. That's why he had planned to leave when he turned 17. So that's what we're going to do. Luffy nodded firmly as they both looked out at the sea together. Someday, we will set out to sea and live life the way we want to. With more freedom than anyone else. Freedom, Nami whispered to herself almost in a dreamlike state. Just what was freedom in this world of prisons and boundaries? Her eyes widening as she remembered what Luffy once said to Rayleigh. I don't want to conquer anything. It's just that the person with the most freedom on the seas is the king of the pirates. She smiled, closing her watery eyes, now fully understanding. Luffy merely nodded with his brother. It was really all they could do. Sabo may be gone, but the two of them were still alive. The three of them once shared the same dream, and if Sabo couldn't fulfill his, then they were willing to stand up and do it for him. I'm sure that we'll make a lot of people our enemies, Ace said. Gramps will become our enemy, too. We'll be risking our lives. We'll cast off when we turn 17. The two remaining brothers looked out at the two seagulls flying over the waves. We will become pirates, Ace declared to the heavens, as if hoping that Sabo could hear him. Right, Luffy called out firmly. And one day I will become the king of the pirates. Ace merely smirked. So long as you don't regret anything that you do from here on out, that's all that matters. From this moment on, we live how we want to. For Sabo's sake if nothing else. Frankie cried harder than ever, feeling as if his heart was being torn out. I gotta admire their dedication, Sanji said. It's incredible, Usopp whispered. Even after all these years, they held true to their promise. They never once stopped. As they sat there, Ace reached down the front of his shirt and pulled out a wrinkled piece of paper. What's that? Luffy asked as Ace carefully unfolded it and stared at it. A letter, he said softly, from Sabo. Luffy and the rest of the Straw Hats gasped out. But how? Luffy called loudly, Sabo's. Sabo sent it before he set out to sea, Ace explained, when he knew that he was going to take his chance at freedom. I get now why he didn't come back. He couldn't come back to us without worrying about us getting killed. He held it out to him. You wanna read it? He asked. Luffy looked at it before he shook his head. I don't need to, he said firmly. Sabo is our brother and we're gonna become pirates and live out his dream. That's all I need to know. Ace smirked. I knew you'd say that. Sabo was just writing to tell me to keep you safe. But Robin was curious as she leaned over Ace's shoulder to look at it and read it out for them as Ace gazed long and hard at the paper, as if trying to memorize the words. "Ace and Luffy," she read out to her crew. "I hope you weren't hurt in the fire. I'm worried, but I have faith in you. I'm sorry about this, but by the time you get this letter, I will be out at sea. A lot has happened, and I've decided to set sail ahead of you." Frankie's lower lip was quivering as Chopper kept rubbing his swollen eyes and Usopp sat on the ground, staring at his feet, unable to say anything. The rest of them merely stood there and listened to Sabo's final words to his brothers. "My destination won't be this kingdom, but elsewhere," Robin continued on, feeling tears burning her own eyes as she read the sincerity in each word. Sabo truly wrote these words from this heart. "There, I'll get stronger, I'll become a pirate. Let's become pirates with more freedom than anyone else, and then meet up again someday. The three of us, somewhere out on the wide, free ocean, I'm sure that someday, we'll meet." Now Sanji and Nami had joined in on the crying as Brook kept his bony hands over his ribcage, where his heart would be normally. It was cruel to think that the brothers were never to meet again. "Oh, and Ace, I wonder who's the older brother between the two of us. 2 eldest sons, and 1 younger brother. It might be strange, but this bond between us is my greatest treasure." "They do say that not all treasure is silver and gold," Sanji said softly, looking down at his hands, his own treasure. "For most pirates, they consider things like gold to be the only kind of treasure. However, the true treasures were the ones that you held to your heart. So long as it is something that you were willing to fight for, it was a treasure. Luffy might still be a weakling and a crybaby, but he's still our little brother," Robin finished up, "so take good care of him for me." She stood up slowly, as Ace sighed and forced a smile. "It's gonna be okay," Ace said to Luffy softly as he held out the paper and let the wind carry it away from him. They all watched the letter drift on the wind, over the ocean, fluttering almost like the wings of a bird as it continued onwards to the horizon. "You're right, we don't need a letter to know what Sabo wanted, Sabo just set sail ahead of us, that's all. We'll leave when we become stronger. Stronger than anyone, Luffy. So that's what's going on," Luffy said thoughtfully after he listened to Ace's explanation to where he was and why he was here. "You didn't understand a word I just said, did you?" Ace asked him with a knowing smile. "Nope," Luffy answered truthfully, actually laughing a little as he rubbed the back of his head, "but it sounds like I'm not dead." "Well, you attained more than I thought you would," Ace said, laughing alongside him. "You really are the same as always, little brother." At the word, brother, Luffy stopped laughing and gazed long and hard at Ace. Ace looked a little surprised by Luffy's sudden change in attitude and asked what was wrong. "Nothing," Luffy said, before he launched himself at Ace, hugging him as tightly as he did when Ace had come back to the house after the fire. He had thought that he'd see him again both times, but he was proven wrong. He didn't care if this was only temporary or not. Ace felt so real, so solid against him. For the last 2 years he often dreamed what it would have felt like to see his big brother again. To talk to him, to touch him, even to feel Ace punch him, he had been willing to trade all the treasure from the One Piece just to see Ace one more time. To just feel safe again. "I'm just so happy I got to see you again." Ace must have understood, because he smiled gently, ruffling Luffy's hair as he hugged him back tightly. His arms were clasped around Luffy, securing him to his chest, as Luffy started sobbing in earnest. "There were just so many things I had wanted to tell you." Luffy's voice grew louder and throatier with each word, not ashamed at the flood of tears that were falling thick and fast. "I can't tell you what it felt like to just sit there and watch you die. It wasn't your fault, Luffy." Ace sighed heavily, and Luffy felt Ace's rib cage rise and fall with the air flowing through his lungs, as though he were organic and alive. "I wasn't thinking about it. I just acted, but I thought I told you that I had no regrets about how I lived my life." "I know, but," Luffy croaked out, "but that moment's been haunting me all this time. Even after everything that's happened, it's like a part of me just can't move on from that." Ace made a soft, soothing sound, patting Luffy on the back as he continued to hold him tightly, letting the tears drench his skin. "I was so angry at you," Luffy told him as his voice hitched, "for a long time. You promised me that you wouldn't die. I'm so sorry." He suddenly felt the world tip slightly, first one way, then the other a couple of inches up and then down, like a seesaw. He realized that this was because Ace was gently rocking him. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." Luffy went on, "I wanted to see you so much. There's so much I want to tell you." Ace grinned, "Sabo will be glad to hear that." Luffy's eyes snapped open and he pulled back to stare at him. "Sabo," he croaked out. "He's here." Ace smiled, bumping his knuckles against his brother's forehead again. "Duh, want to see him."